Good afternoon, patrons, and welcome to the February 2019 Patroncast. I said 2019 first go. I didn't even briefly almost go into 2018 there. I'm used to living in the future. It's great. Welcome to the Patroncast. It's that time of the month again, and I'm just going to start where a very large number of questions are actually about. So let's just start at the obvious place, alright? So, the Fallout 76 mega video. Oh my, that was a lot of effort. I've left Claire with a new instruction, by the way, after the end of that video. So what I've said is, in the event that I plan to make another one of these videos, which I definitely will do because they're fascinating and really cool to put together, Claire is supposed to ask me, how long do I think it's going to take to put together, realistically? And then, whatever I say, she has to insist that I set aside 3 times more time than that, because I set aside nowhere near enough time for the Fallout 76 mega video. I thought I'd be okay, because, I scripted and then I recorded the audio, and then Claire actually took the audio and she, cleaned that up, so the actual audio that you hear my voice, that was all kind of put together by Claire. She did a really good job on that. I barely had to make any changes when I got it back. And then I thought, okay, then I'll just take the script and I'll go through it. I'll record the sections that I need bit by bit inside the game, kind of starting with Fallout 76, and then I'll record all the Fallout 3 footage, then the Fallout New Vegas footage, then the Fallout 1 footage, the Fallout 2 footage, and then any little extras like the Skyrim footage. That didn't work out spectacularly well because I thought, oh, well, I'm recording this bit for this part of the video, but I know for a fact that I need to be in this location that's just round the corner later in the video, so I'll record that at the same time, because otherwise it would be really inefficient. And also there was another problem with the 76 footage in particular, which is Fallout 76 is a nightmare to record for all sorts of reasons, because teleporting around the map, fast travel is not free. It costs money. So I actually took the perk that lets you travel around cheaper, and even then, I was bankrupted. I actually ran out of caps. I was selling stuff out of my stash to keep going around, and then I ran out of stuff I wanted to sell, and I ran out of caps again. And then Thomas and Alana, who helped me with the recording of the little kind of the town section at the end in section 8, Alana gave me some more caps. She just kind of bought some drugs off me at ludicrously elevated values in the game. In the game, that is, I should stress. That was purely in the game. Yeah, that gave me a bit more money. Even then, I ran out of money again. So some of the footage had to be recorded with a secondary character. So I went over to Steve, who was the character I played with on the Fallout 76 live stream back in the day, because he was just sitting on 300 caps. So I just recorded a bunch of stuff in the forest with Steve. So some of that footage is not actually with my main character at all. My main character is currently stranded in Harper's Ferry. Recording the footage around the armory is the last thing I recorded with my main character, because after that point I had no money, so the only places I could actually teleport were back to the vault and back to my camp. But my camp was actually very close by to the vault because I'd moved it there for a different shot where I was talking about how you can totally just lay your camp on the steps down from the vault. Then I realised I was out of money, so I couldn't actually move my camp away. So my camp is now just kind of floating in the middle of nowhere, and I don't actually have an actual main camp anymore because I don't have the money to move it. So at some point I need to go back into that game just to grind for enough money to move my camp back to where it should be on the cliff top, overlooking the White Springs as it is in the game. So that was good. So money was a problem. As was the fact that obviously there's no console command, so I can't just toggle free cam, so everything had to be done with photo mode with the UI disabled, which was really difficult. And then when I was walking around, I needed to set the transparency of the heads-up display down to 0, so that wasn't on screen if I wanted nice shots, but then you can't actually see whether you're hidden or not. You can't see the state of your hunger or thirst or health. So during the bit where I was doing the fight in the Savage Divide against the Super Mutants, I didn't know how much health I had. I could vaguely estimate it, because when you're low on health, the sound gets really muffled, so I knew I needed a stim pack from that. But that was fun. That was interesting to do. And you can't force events to spawn, of course. It's pure potluck whether events spawn or not. So I got most of what I needed to, but Death Blossoms, I could not get Death Blossoms to spawn. On Friday evening, on kind of the 2 days before the video came out, I spent 3 hours just server hopping, looking for any server where Death Blossoms was happening, and I could not find one instance of it. I came across 3 nukes during that time, but no Death Blossoms. That event just doesn't seem to spawn commonly at all, so that was fun. So, yeah, recording it was really tricky. So it was a lot of footage where, you have to spend a lot of time traveling around just to get, like, a shot that's going to be 5 seconds of the video. Like, it could take me, like, anything up to, like, 10 minutes, 20 minutes to get, like, 5-10 seconds of footage for the right bits. So it took a long time. And then because I was trying to save money, because I was so low on money and I couldn't just kind of travel from shot to shot in order, I tried to group the shots together. Then I stopped recording, came out and renamed the file what was in it. But sometimes I forgot some of what was in it, so I needed to redo those shots later. So basically I had a mess of 170 files by the time I was done, and I sat down on, where was I? think it would have been like on Friday morning. I thought, okay, now I'll just put this together, but I've already got the footage and I've well labelled it, so this will be nice. No, it wasn't, because I hadn't labelled it properly and it was all in a random order and I couldn't remember. And as you put more files into an editing program, the strain on it actually goes up and eventually it'll just slow down and either crash or you just have to turn it off and on again and then it's okay for a bit. But the crashes became more and more frequent as time went by and it just became slower and slower and slower. And I realised at the end of Friday, this is never going to be done for Saturday, so I postponed to Sunday. But my mistake was postponing to Sunday rather than just, leaving it open-ended. Because when I postponed to Sunday, that meant that, I didn't want to postpone it again because that'd be ridiculous. I didn't want to postpone it 2 days in a row. So then I was locked into Sunday, which meant I pretty much had to do an all-nighter on Friday and Saturday. Like, on Saturday, because I wanted to start uploading, because it was going to take ages to upload because the file size was massive and the processing would take ages, and then, like, HD showing it would take ages too. I said I'm not going to bed on Saturday evening till it's done. So in the end, I actually went to bed on 6 a.m. on Sunday morning for my Saturday night sleep after setting it to be uploading. So what I kind of realised afterwards was I actually basically gave myself jet lag. Basically, I changed the time zone that I was sleeping in so badly that the next day I was suffering from what felt very much like jet lag. So I used to travel to America on occasion for work back before I did YouTube. And it was a very similar sensation to jet lag after doing the red-eye flights back from Los Angeles. So that was fun. Basically, I managed to give myself jet lag. But it all came out, so that was good. That was very, very good indeed. And a few people have been asking how it did. It did alright. It did fine. Like, next to just about any other video that I could make, it did very, very well indeed. It looks like it's not going to do the same sort of numbers that Fallout 3 is Better Than You Think did. But I'm not really annoyed at that, to be honest, because the stars just happen to perfectly align for Fallout 3 is Better Than You Think. It just happened to get some pickup with the press. It happened to rank really well in YouTube. It happened to just kind of, actually kind of stay ranking #1 to this day, I believe. So, we continue to get a fair amount of traffic of people searching for Fallout 3, which is really, really cool indeed. It just basically, the fact it got to beyond 4 million views was ridiculous. Like, not every video is going to be able to do that. This one will be in, like, the low to mid 100,000s, which is very, very good indeed, and absolutely makes it worth doing, because I got a big burst of subs out of it, and it will continue to get a bit of attention through just kind of floating around as a suggested video, getting new eyeballs on the channel, making new subscribers. It's worth doing. So, like, I could have probably spent the same amount of time I spent on that making, like, several weeks worth of videos in other ways, but those videos would probably have mainly got views from existing subscribers. Big ticket items like video essays do a really good job just kind of like getting new people into the channel. So, like, the burst of a few thousand more extra subscribers, that's worth doing. I might do a slightly smaller one next time just out of curiosity. I've kind of got one in mind. Obviously, I do already have Fallout 4 is Better Than You Think, like, planned out a little bit. I've already got a document with some notes about that. So at some point I'll start having a little look-see at those. Though Claire's basically said I'm not allowed to do that yet. I need to actually have a break and catch up before we actually start working on that. So that'll probably be like, before July. That'll probably be like in late spring, early summer, whatever. That's when that'll be. But I might try and do like a smaller one that I've kind of got in mind. I don't want to say what it is in case I don't do it, but I do have like a smaller one in mind. That will probably be like, I still think something that's really interesting and Fallout-y, but will probably only be like half an hour. But will be a really interesting deep dive into a very specific thing. And if that works well, I could actually spin that off and make more of them really easily. So, yeah, that's how that is so far. I mean, never say never. Like, it's only been out for, like, less than a week so far. There's nothing to say it might not pick up a little bit, but probably when something's been out for, like, 4 days, and it's kind of, just, like, steadily dropped off, and now it's entered its long tail, it's unlikely to jump up suddenly at this point. That doesn't seem desperately likely. So, it's probably done its job. It's not going to be doing anything even near to Fallout 3 as better thing, but as I say, the stars just perfectly aligned on that one. I wasn't really expecting that one to be doing millions of views. Maybe I'd have liked it to do like a little bit more than it did, but then, you know, I'd always like everything to do a little bit better than it actually did. I just like things to do better in general. But, you know, it was worth doing just for a nice little extra burst of subscribers. As I said last time, it's been a quiet couple of months for us. The channel's been ticking along nicely, but I'd like to see some extra growth out of it, which this actually delivered. And I've got a couple of fun things coming up that I think are going to kind of help rejig things a little bit too. So, yeah. Fun stuff coming along. Just wanted to kind of touch on that directly because a lot of people were actually touching on that one. In fact, actually, I did see one question in particular that was very, very interesting. So I actually kind of jumped to that one now because it's on topic, which was someone said, why did you make it one mega video? Why not make it like, you know, a series? Like, you know, it had 8 chapters in it. Why not actually have each of those chapters be its own video, for example? Really interesting idea. And that probably would have meant that it actually got more views overall and thus more ad revenue. But the thing is, and what I was banking on, is YouTube really likes long view times because YouTube cares more about total watch time than it does about total views. Which is why Fallout 3 is Better Than You Think was able to rank so well in YouTube, because even though when it was first appearing it didn't necessarily have as many views as other videos that were ranking high on Fallout 3, because somebody who sat down to watch it on average would actually be hanging around for a very long period of time, it meant the actual watch time it was generating was really, really high, and YouTube really, really flipping liked that. So it did really well, and it got suggested and it ranked really highly. Fallout 76 was built on the same assumption, that even though at the beginning of its life it wouldn't necessarily get that many views, the amount of watch time it would get would impress the YouTube algorithm, and as a result, it might go on to do really good things over the first kind of like couple of days. Doesn't seem to have happened yet. Would be nice if it happened in future, but it all looks like it's kind of slipped off the top spot if you search for Fallout 76 in YouTube, and has started to gently decline. Arguably, it was just really bad luck that the exact kind of weekend that this was ready and it was ready to launch was just after there was the release of the roadmap. And had I really thought about it, I probably should have postponed it for a week or something, because then like the roadmap would have been out the previous week, so all the reaction videos to the roadmap would have been done the week before, and Wild Appalachia wouldn't actually come out until the week after, or like a week and a half or something. It's like mid-March or something. So that probably would have been better. I think I got a bit unlucky that, yeah, as a result of that, I was competing for real estate in Fallout 76 with a lot of people who had, like, you know, hot takes on the roadmap, which were also very, very popular indeed, which probably hurt the video a little bit, whereas when I did Fallout 3 is Better Than You Think, no one was really making Fallout 3 videos for any particular reason. So there wasn't a huge amount of competition. So I probably got a bit unlucky there. There was a mix of bad luck, a bit of unfortunate timing, and just the whims of the YouTube algorithm, which you cannot predict. So it's done fine. It's definitely helped the channel. It's given a boost of views, a boost of subs, which is great. It's just not going to go quite as ridiculously good as the Fallout 3 video did. Anyway, let's move on into the questions, because there's probably a bunch of them about the Fallout 76 video that I haven't actually covered yet. So we'll come back to the mega video. I'm absolutely sure that we will be back to that. In fact, oh, here we go. Starting from some of the oldest questions. Yeah, straight into it. Congratulations on the Fallout 76 essay. It's a masterpiece. Oh, thank you. Hopefully you've recovered a bit from the work-induced jet lag. Mandatory question though, how about Fallout 4 You Only Live Once? Oh, give me a minute to relax, will ya? As I've kind of said previously, like, it's a toss-up between, like, I'm thinking Fallout 2 or Fallout 4 You Only Live Once, like, for next. Honestly, I think both of them will happen this year. I think those are the two big series that are going to be done in 2019. On balance, I think I'm probably leaning towards Fallout 2 first, because right now we're really, really behind on day-to-day videos because of the Fallout 76 mega video, and Fallout 4 You Only Live Once is a video that requires a huge amount of preparation. And while I've done a fair amount of that prep, it's not done yet, so I'd like more time to actually have a proper plan, because I think more than any other You Only Live Once, Fallout 4 You Only Live Once is going to take a huge amount of planning in terms of, like, properly creating routes for it. So I think that will be later this year, and probably Fallout 2 will be up next. That's kind of what I'm coming down on right now, which is going to be interesting. Also, it just kind of feels like a good sort of thing to do, because, like, recently I've been doing a lot of mod stuff between Frost and Dust and New California. There's been a lot of mods, so I do rather want the next series to be, like, you know, proper, hardcore, classic Fallout. So I think some people haven't been 100% convinced on the mods thing. So I think it would be kind of nice to kind of get back and do something that's like, you know, real old school proper Fallout. So that's kind of where I'm coming down right now. It's not like, you know, 100% yet, but that's kind of vaguely what I'm thinking about. John, if you were an existing government entity or department, what would you be? I've had to go and look up a list of the full departments, but then I spotted one and I knew immediately what the answer was, which is the UK Statistics Authority, alright? Because back in the days before I was a YouTuber and I did various work around marketing and whatnot, my favourite thing in the world was data analysis. So I feel like I'd be rather at home at the UK Statistical Authority. That'd be a very, very good place for me, I'd say. John, do you have any experience with the Ace Combat series? You know, it actually comes up a surprisingly large amount. I think that's actually a game that's got a very kind of passionate fan base, because I've definitely seen it come up a lot. I'm aware that Ace Combat 7 did come out recently. We did actually ask for a review code for it, but we never got it. And by the time, therefore, we realised we weren't going to get it, it had already come out and we'd moved on to the next stuff that was launching. So at some point we may give it a look-see, but I don't actually have an exact time in mind for that sort of thing. But I have seen the trailer and it does kind of look slightly ridiculous, but in a sort of awesome way, I'll admit. John, thanks for making videos like Daddy Dating Simulator. It makes the queer community feel very welcome. Do you and Claire have any gay or trans friends? Oh, many actually. In fact, probably more than you'd expect based on the average number of people in the general population that are gay. And that's probably partly because back when I was at university, Oxford was a real safe haven for all sorts of alternative lifestyles. So I knew all sorts of people who lived their lives in all sorts of ways, and many of those people I'm still in contact with. So I know people with every orientation and preference under the sun. So I've always just taken a live and let live attitude, to be honest. You know, just let people live their lives however they want, as long as it's not hurting anybody, I don't care. And for some people I did know they did hurt other people, but it was entirely consensual, and you go nuts too. Oh, the stories I could tell. The stories I could tell about that, but I won't. I never will. Yeah, I knew some slightly wild people back in the day. I knew some ever so slightly wild people of all different persuasions. But yeah, let's move on. Let's move on very, very quickly indeed. I know it's a month off, but the next podcast will probably be late, so good luck with Brexit. Both of you take care of yourselves. Yeah, actually, at the time of recording, there is more and more chatter about a potential delay going on there. It might be postponed for a little bit, so not sure whether or not that will have actually happened before the next Patroncast. Just so you know, how we're actually kind of planning for it. We have kind of discussed a particular cupboard that we're going to clear out, and ahead of Brexit, we're just going to stockpile some, some dried and canned goods. So it's actually got to the stage where we are considering that stockpiling food is a good idea, because various sober individuals and organisations have overtly said, hey, there might be disruptions to the food supply. So we're going to get some food and, just some over-the-counter medicines in, just in case that's a thing. So that's exciting. That's always great when you think, you know what, just in case there's no food or medicine, I'll stockpile it. It's not always a great sign. It's not always a great sign, but that seems to be the common sense approach. So that's what we're going to be doing. Hopefully, it gets postponed until somebody knows what the hell they're doing. That'd be great. Good day, John. In this marvellous age of live streams and the like, when can we expect you to have your own heated gaming moment, and what sort of scandalous opinion and verbiage should we brace ourselves for? Honestly, I'd like to think I'm completely immune to that sort of thing, because in case anyone's not familiar, the idea of the heated gaming moment, that particular quote, refers to streamers who have said various things they're not supposed to say and have tried to excuse themselves afterwards, saying, oh yes, it was just a heated moment. I never liked that excuse, because the thing is, if you say something in a heated moment, then that's the sort of thing that you would say in general. And, hopefully, I don't think, I've got any horrendous, awful opinion or, word I like to say in private or something that might slip out live. I really hope I don't. So, I don't know. The most controversial opinion I might, accidentally state would probably be something about, the order in which you do things in tea making or whatever, or how I don't really drink coffee, it just doesn't really agree with me, so I'm not a coffee drinker. That's scandalous to some people. That'll do for scandal, I think. John, I find myself getting burned out on video games when I play too long. You've been playing video games for several hours a day for years. How do you maintain such enthusiasm for gaming? by very, very carefully kind of curating what it is I play. Like, we kind of look over, like, every game that comes out, and we very carefully pick the ones that look most interesting. Like, many times we don't look at, like, what's trending or what's the biggest release, because I look at it and think, that's not my sort of thing. On this channel, I try and always exclusively play stuff that I am personally into. Because I suspect if I did ever just, like, chase trends, I probably would end up getting burnt out on it. So I only play stuff I think I've got a good chance of actually liking, or a good chance of making a really cool, interesting, entertaining video out of, and ideally both at the same time. That's really what I'm kind of looking for. So I suppose that's how, really. It's just a case of only playing stuff that I think ahead of time is going to be my cup of tea. I was looking at your channel stats on Social Blade and I noticed something strange. Every day you gain subs, but on February 22nd, you lost 41. I looked at your channel that day and didn't see anything abnormal. Any thoughts? Yes, indeed, I did notice that myself. That was basically just one of the little YouTube purges. Sometimes YouTube just basically clears out a bunch of dead or spam accounts or whatever, and just basically removes a whole bunch of them. If you're ever not sure whether that's what you're actually seeing, just kind of look up various different channels, and if you see like a whole bunch of subs disappearing or more subs disappearing than normal on multiple channels on the same day, that just means YouTube's done a bit of spring cleaning. So like when I saw that, I thought, that is interesting, I don't know why that's happened. So I went and looked up various other channels in the same space as me, and I noticed similar trends, like channels that are gaining really fast, gained less than usual, channels that are slowly losing subs, lost more than usual that day, for example. So we were just kind of in an odd situation where we're kind of slowly gaining subs, but when there's a sub purge, we just like for a single day drop into the negative. So it looks quite dramatic, but honestly it's just a question of YouTube doing some tidying up. After finishing the Fallout 76 mega video, I wanted to ask how you think Bethesda should implement these changes. Oh, that's a loaded question. That's a very loaded question, because there's some things I think Bethesda can't feasibly implement. Like, the video is in some ways a thought experiment. Like, how you might have made Fallout 76 if you had a much longer development time, a more experienced team making it, and you could start with these assumptions from the beginning. Like, can you retrofit all of that into Fallout 76? No, I don't think you can. Like, the best way they could do it or come close to it right now would be, in the same way they're about to set up these survival mode servers, which play by their own different rules, they could create, like, a hardcore survival server that plays by my rules, but it would have to play entirely by its own set of rules. It wouldn't be able to mix with the general population, and honestly, like, some of my ideas are such a huge amount of effort, like, rebuilding things and getting the trains and monorails running and diddly-diddly-dee, and oh yeah, the dynamic world, where there can be environmental degradation and total collapse. Like, that's a huge thing. That's huge, huge, huge stuff. So, yeah, I'm not sure whether it's feasible to actually do that. Some of that stuff was thought experiment, but if they were to ever try to implement something of that nature, I think it would need to be in its own separate hardcore servers. I'm in the middle of watching New Vegas You Only Live Once and I'm chuckling at the use of on-screen text, such as safe houses tend to be safe. I feel like I remember a greater use of on-screen text, usually poking fun at yourself in the older videos. Any reason you got away from it? Really good question, actually. The reason why there used to be more on-screen text is because I would often think of jokes a long time after I was done recording, because back when I was newer to it and still learning the craft a bit more, it took more of my concentration just to play the game and commentate. And it wasn't until I was editing that a really good joke that I should have said at the time actually occurred to me. These days, now I'm a lot more practiced and can do it a lot more easily, I think I can actually come up with those jokes better on the fly. So the particularly good jokes that I actually say out loud in the video, back in the old days, I probably wouldn't have come up with those until editing, and they would have been on-screen text, but these days I actually come up with them while I'm recording, just because I think I've got better at the craft with more practice, like you do with anything. So I don't think it's really changed, it's just those jokes have moved out of the text and into the video themselves, just because I'm a bit quicker on the uptake in that regard. Who's your and Claire's favourite team on Big Fat Quiz of the Year? Oh, remember that question earlier about, my controversial gaming opinion that might slip out in a live stream? So, controversial opinion, I've never watched Big Fat Quiz of the Year or Big Fat Quiz of Everything. I have literally never seen it. I'm pretty sure Claire hasn't either, so I just don't know. I just don't flipping know. Sorry, I have absolutely no clue. Love the Smash Brothers episode with Nerd Cubed. Good, there's more to come. In fact, when I say there's more to come, what I mean is, by the time you hear this, the second episode will have already been out on the channel. So hopefully that goes down well. I'm not sure when there's going to be the third episode though. Sometimes, as does happen with like series with me and Dan, we can be a bit inconsistent because it's very hard to actually find time when we're both free to record. So I'm not sure when episode 3 is going to be precisely, but sometime or another. Who knows? Is it possible to do a live stream of just you playing with other people, for example, the patrons? Love your commentating and just thought it would be hilarious. Keep up the good work. I did try and do that on one occasion. I tried to do like a live community event live stream thing. I believe that was the Rollercoaster Tycoon 2 open free version that was with the community at the same time as being live streamed. And what I learned from that is there's too much stuff going on simultaneously. Like, a community play day is great. Then I make edited highlights out of that, which is what happened with GTA 5, and I thought that was really, really good fun. And live streams are really good fun too. I think kind of, you know, me and Claire can make those work really well. After a bit of a shaky start on some of our first few, I think we've kind of really got into the groove of those, and I think we both really enjoy them. Trying to do a community play day at the same time as live streaming is just too much, and I think it doesn't work because you're trying to engage with the people who you're actually playing with. I'm trying to also banter with Claire. Obviously, you know, people are down in the chat, the super chat's coming in. I'm also just trying to play the game well. It's too much stuff happening simultaneously, and it gets a bit all over the place. So, individually, great ideas, absolutely, and I really do need to get another community play day in the calendar, but I don't think I want to do all those things at once. I think that's just a bit too much in my experience. Any chance you could revisit Endless Space or check out the new 5X game, Alliance of the Sacred Sons? Wait, 5X? What's the 5th X? I know about 4X. Hang on, what's 5X? I just googled 4X versus 5X and I can't find a definition for 5X, so that might actually be a typo. Alliance of the Sacred Sons was the one that was suggested anyway. The one I do have in mind, actually, in terms of Endless Space... Hang on, this is multiple tiers of question. I need to actually work for these one by one. Endless Space. I already played Endless Space... Didn't I play Endless Space 2? I think I played Endless Space 2. So I believe, have code for Endless Legend that the dev sent me at some point. So the closest thing to Endless Space I'll probably be playing at some point is Endless Legend. Alliance of the Sacred Sons has come up before and is recommended here in this question by like Crusader Kings meets Stellaris. Oh, you're just trying to sell this. Turn-based Crusader Kings meets Stellaris. Alright, fine. You've got it on the long list. Congratulations. That's a good way to sell it to me. John, if you had to eat a beach and take a long walk on some ice cream, which beach and what flavour would you choose? Okay, so the beach would be the Gulpi Yuri beach, because ahead of this question I actually looked up what is the smallest beach in the world, and it is actually acknowledged to be the Gulpi Yuri beach, so it's still, you know, quite large for a beach. That's still quite a lot of sand, but I'd still rather eat less sand rather than more, so I'm going to go for the smallest beach in the world. And for flavour, I guess I'll go for chocolate. Because Claire's favourite flavour of ice cream is chocolate. And sure, I've walked in a bit of it, but if it's big enough for me to be walking in, like, I'm only going to be walking on bits of it. So after I'm done with the walking bits, we could just, like, you know, scrape that bit off, and Claire can have the rest of the chocolate ice cream, and then everybody wins. A follow-up question on the Fallout 76 business. What do you think of the idea of a more traditional Fallout MMO? Now, this is interesting because that's vaguely what I was going towards. You actually go on to specify Star Wars Galaxies. Now, I never played Star Wars Galaxies myself, but I know a lot about it. I did a lot of reading about it because in preparation for the video, I did a lot of kind of, you know, research into various different big online communities that have been successful and then where they went wrong and what caused their eventual collapse. And Star Wars Galaxies is a really, really interesting case study. And I think you're right, that if Fallout 76 had been like Star Wars Galaxies was in its early days, where you could specialise in all sorts of non-combat roles and be a musician and a dancer and a trader and whatever, I'd have liked it a lot more. Like, you know, as I said during the video, like, if I'd been able to specialise as, like, a wasteland chef and be the best chef in the whole damn server, that would have been amazing. I'd have loved that sort of thing. Definitely, I think that would have been more my cup of tea. So yeah, even though I never played it myself, I think Star Wars Galaxies, as it once was, would have been a really interesting model for Fallout 76, yes. Just a quick question, if you could design a new Fallout game, where would it take place and what aspects from other games would you include? Sorry, that's your idea of a quick question. Are you mad? Right, okay. Where would it take place and what aspects from other games would you include? Like, what I generally think is, like, in terms of the best bits of older Fallout games, I would actually really like to actually take the atmosphere of Fallout 3, the lonely, haunting, desolate wasteland, combine it with the faction system and the way quests work in Fallout New Vegas, and potentially mix in the shooting mechanics of Fallout 4. Modified slightly, perhaps, to mean you have to specialise a bit more before you're as good as you are in Fallout 4. Because, yeah, Fallout 4, because you're, like, such a crack shot with, like, every gun the moment you pick it up, it kind of undermines the RPG side of things, because it means you don't have to invest in being a gun user to actually use a gun really, really well. But I tell you what I'd also really like to see. I would love to see a modern turn-based Fallout game. And I think a lot of people would potentially be really flipping down for that. Something a bit more like Wasteland 2, like Atom RPG, maybe kind of mix in bits of XCOM, I don't know. But you know, I think there could be something really interesting in that. Maybe as a spin-off, perhaps, because, yeah, 3D Fallout I think has a lot to recommend it. But next time, given, you know, the spin-off game after you've done the main game in the franchise, so whatever follows Fallout 5, I would love Fallout 5 to be like, you know, a big, well-polished 3D Fallout game, maybe with, you know, more RPG elements and more New Vegas-y stuff mixed in. But, like, if they're planning to do, say, a couple of years later, a faster-to-develop spin-off game, like 76, like New Vegas, like Fallout 2, I would really, really love to see a modern turn-based Fallout game back again. I would flipping love to see that. That would just be flippin' marvellous. That would be great. But yeah, for the main Fallout game for Fallout 5, I'd actually like to go back to California itself, where we haven't actually been in a main Fallout game since the events of Fallout 1 and Fallout 2. Sure, there's plenty of references to what's going on in California in New Vegas, but we haven't actually been there or seen any of it for so long, so I would love to go back and see what's actually going on there these days, because it does sound like it's an excellent place for a Fallout game to be set in the late Republic days of the NCR, where it's got big and bloated and corrupt and there's factions and all sorts of things. It feels like a good setting for a faction game. If you set it post New Vegas, there could be remnants of the Legion if we assume that the NCR ending is the canon ending. Though if you want to, actually, it might be more interesting to say that the house ending of New Vegas is the canon ending, because then the NCR has been driven back in disgrace, and that would be really interesting for triggering political upheaval, because then the political leaders that ordered the army to move into Vegas, that was then beaten back, they would be in trouble, the military leadership would be in trouble. It would be a time of really interesting, great upheaval, where if there were factions waiting for their opportunity to make a move against the NCR, the point where the NCR has just received a very severe bloodied nose in New Vegas, that would be a really good time to do it. So maybe a game set just a handful of years after the end of New Vegas, set actually in the center of California itself, set around the NCR, its surrounding territories, check out what's going on with Vault City and all the other cool communities from the old Fallout games. That'd be interesting. That'd be very, very interesting indeed. Did you have a hard time deciding on what end cards to use for the Fallout 76 video essay? I'm gonna be honest, I didn't, because by the time I'd actually finished putting it all together and viewing through it and making sure I was happy with it, as I say, it was 6 a.m. It was 6 a.m. and I was exhausted. I just slapped that Fallout 4 Frost end card on it, set it rendering, set it uploading, and just, yeah, off to bed. Off to bed. I'm done. It's flipping fine. The next two questions, to kind of just, you know, bring out a bit of black humour, actually go together very nicely, which is question number 1, with the British government deadlocked, what are your plans for no-deal Brexit and the ensuing chaos? And question number 2, John, if you had to live anywhere else in the world, where would it be? Also, do you watch hockey? Which feels like that person is angling for me to say Canada, which I'm totally going to say anyway because I've got Canadian family, so Canada would be totally high up the list. Yeah, as I said earlier, like, you know, we're going to stockpile some food in case there's problems, you know, food for us, make sure we've got plenty of food for Tabby as well, so everything's fine there, but honestly, we don't know. That's the big thing, of course, it's the uncertainty. Nobody knows what's actually gonna happen as a result of this. It's just, you know, a great big mystery that we're accelerating towards, and no one seems to know how it's gonna work out. So, if it really is an absolute disaster, then the advantage is we are relatively mobile. I'm not, like, tied to a job that has a physical office location that I can't leave. You know, if there was some form of absolute disaster that meant I had to leave this country in a hurry, I could just box up some computers, shove them in the back of a taxi, go across a border to Scotland or Ireland or whatever, and, like, you know, be set up and working again the following day. Because YouTube doesn't really care what country you're in for the most part. You know, and if England just sank into the sea tomorrow, I could basically just break down the company that underpins Many a True Nerd and just form a new one in any other country on Earth. It would be remarkably easy for me to move elsewhere. I don't really want to, because, you know, I like where I am, and I'm not really much for travelling and change. I'm very much a homebody. I like things to be as they are. I'm not keen on travelling and change and all the rest of it. I just want things to, you know, just be as they are, and I can be very, very quietly content like that. But if there are real major social upheaval, food problems, medicine problems, whatever, absolutely at that point, we can take advantage of the mobility we have, which is a real advantage of both working for the YouTube channel, me and Claire, to potentially consider whether we want to, not necessarily permanently, but, you know, for a time, whether we want to consider moving elsewhere. And I really hope we don't have to consider that, but it would also be foolish for us to completely rule it out. So we watch eagerly to see what's going to happen next. And as I said, if I had to go for anywhere else, probably like I'd go for Ireland just because it's very close by, because I do also have a lot of family in the UK as well. But, you know, if I had to leave the local area, there's a decent chance Canada would be fairly high up my list, because I've got a lot of family over in that direction, and it's always seemed a lovely country whenever I visited it. I'd love to see you play 60 Parsecs again. You know what, I'll have a little look-see into it. Like, if they've ever released any updates or DLC for it, that'll probably be an excellent opportunity, because for reasons I've never been able to fully understand, 60 seconds and 60 Parsec videos do ridiculously well. Like, they're some of the best performing videos outside of Fallout. And I don't know why, and I'm not saying they're bad games or anything, I just don't understand why they do so flipping well every time. So I probably should just play it again, just because, you know, they're actually fairly nice and quick and easy to put together. They're fun, interesting videos. So, yeah, I'll have a little look, see if there's been any updates since launch. John, what are your go-to game and TV shows for when you just want to forget about the state of the world? For TV shows, Claire and I do rather enjoy the most ridiculously British shows we can find. So, MasterChef and The Great British Sewing Bee and The Great British Bake Off and stuff like that. I find those very nice and relaxing. For game-related shows, my favourite creator for just chilling out and relaxing at the end of the day is actually Chucker Conroy. I love Chucker Conroy. It's brilliant. Loving the Phantom Hourglass series he's doing right now. Really, really chill stuff. Love his style. So relaxing, so well put together. Flip and adore it. Have you or Claire ever thought about doing an MATN UK tour, touring major cities across the country, meeting fans and compiling a video of interesting facts and pieces of history, culture, places to visit, etc., as if someone from outside the UK was coming to visit our wonderful country? It would be like an MATN twist on a travel guide. It's a fun idea for a video. The problem is how much time that would take to do. Because there's a reason why I don't actually travel very much for YouTube, which is not what you'd expect, which is I have in the past, on quite a few occasions actually, turned down the opportunity to travel to America to go and play a game. Like Mafia 3. Mafia 3, when that was actually coming out. I went to play that at 2K's UK office in Windsor and Eton Riverside, which was fairly easy for me to get to. But before they offered to let me play it there, they offered to fly me out to America, where they would cover the cost of, you know, the transfers and the plane and hotels and whatever. They'd pay for everything, including food, and all I needed to do was go out there and play Mafia 3. But I said no to them at the time and only agreed when they said we'll do it in the UK. Because if you think about it, the amount of time I'm using up is very, very high indeed for that. Because, you know, you need to travel for like a full day to get there. Then you actually do like, you know, recording for maybe like one video. Then you travel home, assuming you don't actually stay for longer. And then you're probably jet lagged, so you're not working at full capacity. So at that point, you've basically got one video out of 3 or 4 days worth of work. And that's fine if you're a salaried employee. Like, I used to travel for work all the time. I was mentioning earlier, I went to Los Angeles. And that's fine. Because when you're traveling and you're actually on work hours, you're being paid the same for traveling as you would be in the office. But now I'm self-employed and I just do this. If I'm not making videos, nobody's making videos. So the amount of time it would take me to do a full UK tour and meet and greets in all the different cities and all of that, that would take like, you know, probably a week minimum, probably more than that, all things considered. And all I'd get out of it would be a handful of videos that aren't really the core stuff for the channel anyway. Now, it might go really, really well. It could be a huge new breakout hit, but it's a huge investment of time when I can't be doing anything else. So it's a really nice idea, but the problem with it is, yeah, it would just take a huge amount of time. Huge amount of time to do, unfortunately. So I'm not sure it's really practical. I always love how kind, energetic and respectful you are in your videos. Oh, that's very nice of you to say, thank you. How much of that is natural John versus YouTube personality John? Okay, this isn't a fair question for me to answer by myself. So, in terms of how kind, energetic, and respectful I am in real life, I'm going to regret this. I'm going to hand over to Editing Claire.
I don't know why it is that John always thinks I'm going to roast him when he passes questions like that along to me. I genuinely like him. He is a very good person. He is kind and thoughtful and respectful, and if he wasn't all of these things, I wouldn't have been dating him for 10 years. I'm gonna have to go and tell him that I actively like him later today. As for energetic, he is very bloody energetic all of the time. The kind of energy that you get in the videos, that is all John. The YouTube John is louder than regular John, but that's about it. Like, John is this level of energy from when he gets up in the morning first thing. And I'm not a morning person, so it's a lot first thing in the morning. But if you were to come across John walking in the street, for instance, you would definitely be able to tell it's John because he has an actual literal spring in his step. When he walks, he is literally bouncy.
With the rumoured Fallout-style countdown clock on Amazon, which would excite you the most? Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas remakes or a new Fallout game? Well, I don't think we're going to get a new Fallout game yet. We're blatantly not going to get Fallout 5 right now. The big 18 people over at Bethesda are working on Elder Scrolls 6. And then they'll be working on their new unique thing. What's it? Starfield? Whatever that one is. They're going to be working on those. Alright, they don't have the manpower right now to be dealing with Fallout 5. Because if they were to be working on Fallout 5, they would have needed to have gone on a massive hiring drive, and the trade press would have spotted it, and there'd be rumours circling around like crazy right now. They're not working on Fallout 5. Fallout 3 remake is much more likely because I personally think the amount of, beef and bad blood between Bethesda and New Vegas is massively overstated. But even then, they don't talk about New Vegas a huge amount of the time, so I find Fallout 3 remastered a much more likely thing that we might be seeing. Because there were rumours of that some time ago, and there was something about a copyright or a trademark in Germany that pointed in that direction. I don't remember the details. But it's certainly been something that's been hinted at for a long time. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't know anything about it yet. And I know that sounds like an odd thing to say. What I mean by that is sometimes I know more than I'm allowed to say. Just because my close relationship to various publishers means sometimes I find out information before it's actually in the public sphere. Because generally in the past I've proven to be trustworthy. Where when I found stuff out, I haven't spread it around or leaked it in any way. So therefore people are happy to just kind of tell me things. So sometimes I know stuff before the general public. But on this one, if Bethesda knows something, they're not telling me. And generally, Bethesda's pretty open about telling me about stuff that's coming up. So, I don't know. But if it's anything at all, I'd say it's probably the Fallout 3 remake. Any chance of a Cities Skylines live stream anytime soon? Well, we did one of those before. Didn't go spectacularly well in some ways, but it was kind of amazing in others. I wouldn't rule it out. I do really enjoy Cities Skylines. I'm not very good at it, but I think it's really, really good fun. So, I definitely would not count against it just showing up again at random at some point, yes. Do you have any thoughts about Total War 3 Kingdoms being delayed until May? Do you think that's a bad sign? Or is some last minute bug fixing and balancing a good thing? I think it's a good thing. Because the version I've played, 'cause of course I've already played a campaign map and some battles. I think it worked pretty well. But in the same way that, it was maybe a bit worrying that Fallout 76's beta was so close to launch that any feedback was never going to make it into the game. It was a bit odd that the very first time they showed Total War 3 Kingdoms in terms of the campaign to the public was so close to launch, meant that there just wasn't enough time to fix stuff that came up. And it was really interesting, but it definitely could probably do with a little bit of polish. And since then, they've done a couple of live streams where they've shown off the game again, and it looks like the AI is improved over what it was I saw. So I suspect they were just kind of polishing up the AI a little bit, because the AI maybe left a little bit to be desired in the version that I played, and it looks like they've improved it in the version they're showing off since. So it's probably for the best. It's never a good idea to rush a game out, and I dislike the culture that exists with some publishers of release something and then patch it later. It's a good idea to launch a game in a good state. If that means delaying it, that means delaying it. I think it's a good thing. Have you ever been contacted to do any voice acting work? No, I haven't, but I don't think that's really an attack on my voice or anything. I think that's just that there are forums and channels and whatever for this sort of thing. People who want to be in voice work, they come up with a proper portfolio and, they make sure they post it in the right places and with the right agencies and archives and whatever. And I've never done any of that, so there's no reason anyone would ever have approached me to do voice work because I don't advertise myself. in the right places. Like, you know, if YouTube ever started completely going to hell and I was looking for somebody to just tide me over and kind of put together a few bits of self-employment, it's entirely possible I might give it a go, just because I've got this experience doing this now. So, never say never, but I've never been directly approached about it myself. If you discovered you were the child of an Olympian god or goddess, which would you prefer as your godly parent? Ooh, I've got a really good answer for this. I would go for the one most of you have probably never heard of. I would go for Nyx, who is Night. We know basically nothing about her, by the way. We know she is female, we know she is the personification of the night, and she is mentioned extremely briefly in the Iliad, where it is mentioned that Zeus is afraid of her. And Zeus, to be clear, in the Iliad, makes a really big point of being as strong as all the other gods put together. He does this big showy tug-of-war thing where he like picks up a massive chain and invites every other god to pull the other side of the chain, and he's as strong as all of them put together. So Zeus is a big deal. He's a really OP god in the Iliad. But he's scared of Night. Why is everyone scared of Night? And we don't know. I've always been fascinated by the character of Night in Greek mythology, because we know just nothing about her, aside from the fact that she is apparently the most terrifying thing imaginable. Like, you know, the father and king of the god is absolutely terrified of her and isn't terrified of anything else. So I feel like, you know, being the child of a god in Greek mythology is dangerous, because it's only a matter of time until some other god decides they don't like the look of you and, like, you know, kills you. But I feel like if you were the child of Night, you'd be pretty safe, because nobody, not even Zeus himself, is willing to annoy the Night. So I've decided that Nyx would be my mother, and that would be great. Do you think Fallout 76 is going to remain relevant in any scene? At this point, to me, it seems like wherever it goes, it's had its chance at being big and missed it, whatever the reason. Do you think it makes sense economically or from any other perspective to try and mend it? Interesting question, interesting perspective. Personally, I would say yes. Because when you've got a franchise as big as Fallout and a publisher as big as Bethesda, nothing is gone forever. The fact it's had a bit of a dodgy launch certainly is going to get in the way of it ever going on to be successful. But if they were to actually make the decision to go quiet, to fix everything, to relaunch a radically different iteration, you know, they've got the money and they've got the reputation for a big marketing splash, a big PR splash. If the game were to just go like, you know, free to play tomorrow with some modest improvements, that might significantly, hugely boost the player base. And potentially if they were to keep adding content, they might be able to make a success of it yet. The existing model seems to be doing not spectacularly, but that's not to say they won't find a model that will work in future. Whether that's by modifying the game to bring it back to people's attention who already gave it a go, or by trying a radically different business model like free to play that might work for them better. House Party is my all-time favourite MATN episode by far. Could you share any interesting or funny behind-the-scenes anecdotes about that video? Oh, I'm trying to remember back now because that was some time ago. The thing that I do remember was that video was a real pain to record because that game is buggy as all hell, which is a lot of the interactions are dependent on one character seeing another, but because huge amounts of it don't actually happen in cutscenes, instead it all happens with real models moving around the house in real time, it's very hard to figure out when someone is or isn't actually going to see something. So you might want a character to see or not see another thing, but then they just basically freak out because of a weird angle you couldn't possibly have foreseen. Like, I can't remember which character it is now, but one of them, like, you have to be alone for her to, like, I don't know, take her top off for you to take a photo or something. I can't remember. But, like, she repeatedly refused to flipping do it because she said, oh no, someone's coming. And I couldn't figure out for the life of me why it was happening. That section alone took like half an hour of just chasing her around the house, trying to find a room she considered private enough, because I've no idea what the hell was going on with those assets, but people just seem to occasionally be able to see through doors, or characters assume that other characters could see through doors. In general, it was a real flipping mess, because so much of that game is about one character seeing something, and there's no way of being able to guarantee whether a character does or doesn't actually see something, so it was such a nightmare to put together. I have a very special / silly request. Would you be willing to say something as American John that we patrons could record and use as our alarm ringtone? Oh, go on then, why not? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm American John, and it's time for you to get saddled up and ride out. There you go. I hope you enjoy waking up to that. And apparently it's also Grace's 1-year patronversary. Happy patronversary, Grace! John, I'm starting to make my own videos, but I feel like my commentary really isn't as good as I'd like it to be. Do you have any tips on how to make commentary more fun and interesting? I'm going to give you an answer you probably don't want to hear, but huge amounts of practice. Like, I can barely bear to go back to my old videos these days. I find my old commentary so scruffy, and the editing is so scruffy. But I didn't know that at the time, because I didn't have the experience to know that. It's all about practice, and there's no shortcuts. Like, if you happen to be the most charismatic bastard that ever walked the earth, you've probably got a bit of a shortcut. You can get into it faster. But there's no easy shortcuts for this sort of thing, because it's this whole new thing that you can't just jump into. It's the same reason I think it's a very, very bad idea when video games like hire celebrities to do voiceovers. Because if they're not actually, you know, experienced voice actors, they often do very, very bad jobs. And sometimes we've seen that when major celebrities have actually been added into a game and then been patched out subsequently because they were so terrible at it, because they just weren't trained to do it, because they were being put in a scenario that wasn't really in line with their skill set. So I feel like there's going to be very little in the way of shortcuts for you. Like, it's a really fun, interesting, unique thing to do, doing commentary for gameplay videos, but it just takes practice. It just takes practice, practice, and practice. Like, the only shortcut you really do have is editing, I suppose, which is there's nothing to stop you doing like a few takes of a joke. Like, when you're still finding your feet and you're not sure about your delivery, feel free to, like, you know, when something happens and you think of something to say it a few different ways and then figure out in editing which of those takes you actually want to use. Because when you edit it all together, you can just listen to the 3 versions side by side, pick your favorite, move it up. I don't do that very much anymore, but there is still the odd occasion, even today, when I'll do like a few takes of me saying something and pick one down the line. It absolutely can happen. So, yeah, be very happy to do multiple takes and then edit down until you're happy with something, until you start getting your own delivery down, and then it's just practice, practice, practice. If you could get away with using any commercial copyrighted song for your channel's theme song completely free, what would it be? I've always really loved the 11th Doctor's theme, I Am the Doctor, from Doctor Who, obviously. So I would deeply love to be able to use that as my personal theme song. Don't think I can get away with it, but I would deeply love to be able to. 2.5 hours. I have just one question. Are you okay? Bit tired. I'm going to be honest, both me and Claire are a bit tired, which is why we've had a few shorter videos out this week, like Resort Boss Golf and Ape Out. We've had a few shorter videos floating around this last week, just while we get back on our feet and we get stabilised. But you're absolutely right, like, you know, we've left ourselves a bit tired, very lacking in, like, you know, a backlog of videos, so we're getting ourselves stabilised right now. We're working towards it. Could you please serenade your patrons with a couple of lines from Skater Boy? Yes, but on one condition. In line with the earlier question, I need to do it as American John. I no idea how this is going to work, by the way. Hopefully this is all right. He was a boy, she was a girl. Oh, God, no, he was... How do you even do that in American? American John. He was a boy, she was a girl. Can I make it any more obvious? Moving swiftly on. I just found out that supply drops in 76 are no longer instanced and now give you a bounty for looting them if you weren't the one who called them, despite still giving you a quest saying you should check it out. So I guess I'm asking you your thoughts on Bethesda seemingly lowering the ways for players to help each other outside their friend list. I don't think that's really about helping or not helping other players. I think that's about trying to fix how these things were supposed to work all along, but it's not really worked out. Like, I think one of the things that Bethesda tried to do that has really failed, and honestly, despite the fact I just spoke for 2.5 hours about this, there's a whole bunch of stuff I didn't touch on. Like, I think, like, Bethesda wanted there to be PvP hubs on the map. Like, they wanted workshops to be PvP hubs, and they wanted supply drops to be PvP hubs, where people would fight over things. And nobody ever does. And the problem was, supply drops just gave everyone loot. There was no reason for people to fight. So I understand why they'd no longer be instanced. I'd totally be in favour of supply drops containing super valuable stuff, like legendaries and everything, but they shouldn't actually give you a bounty for looting them. It should just be a race. The person who calls it down should maybe get, like, told about it first so they can be the first on the scene, but absolutely then everybody else should be told, and yeah, whoever is the first person to grab it gets it. Possibly like the area immediately around supply drop should be a PvP area where actually fighting is totally 100% allowed. I'd be down for that sort of thing. Make them more interesting. So I'm up for them being no longer instants. That's a fine change as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, bounty for looting them if you're not yours, not keen on that. It was my girlfriend Mara's birthday last week. Could you sing her a birthday song? Yes, and because it was her birthday, I won't even massacre it by doing it as American John. Happy birthday, dear Mara. Happy birthday to you. You probably wish that had been American John. That was probably completely flat. I'm terrible at singing, but whatever. Have you seen the upcoming Switch game YouTubers Life, and will you be featuring it on the channel? I think that's only coming to Switch soon. I think that's actually been on PC for ages. I saw someone else playing it. I thought, while it might make a fun video, the game itself looked a bit ropey and limited, so I didn't think it was worth bothering with. Maybe at some point, but it's not really high on my to-do list. Can you think of any roadblocks that would get in the way of a New Vegas plot structure with Fallout 4 gameplay loops attached? That's actually pretty much what I was discussing earlier. I think that could work. The only problem I would have is, yeah, as I was hinting at earlier, Fallout 4 has the issue, if you even consider it an issue, of being a little bit like too much of a good shooter, or maybe just too much of a shooter full stop. Which is, if you pick up a gun, they're easy to use, they work well, they've got, like, you know, sights you can attach to them, they shoot straight and true and whatever. And I think that gets away from the RPG elements of Fallout. I think that's a problem. Which is, I think you can totally have Fallout 4 gunplay attached to New Vegas plot structures, but I think you'd need to have your character starting off not as good as they start off in Fallout 4. Potentially, as I was suggesting in the Fallout 76 video, like, you know, having characters at low levels be slow to reload, misfiring, dropping their guns, swaying aim like crazy, like it was back in New Vegas. Add some of that in, which gets taken away as you invest in a particular gun skill, then potentially we're on to something good, yes. How many mega videos have you already got plans to do, and how many are you already writing? I have plans for 2, one proper mega video, that's Fallout 4 is better than you think, which is already noted but not really written. It needs to be significantly rearranged and redone before that's ready to go. And the shorter one I mentioned earlier that I don't want to spoil yet, there's not really a mega video, but will be, I still think, something quite interesting. How does it feel to have put more work into one video than the entire collective effort of those managing Brexit? The sad thing is, I can't be 100% sure. You're lying. Like, we have actually had, like, ministers showing up to proper meetings in Portcullis House in the UK. And, like, you know, people who are responsible for figuring this out haven't actually read various important peace agreements that Brexit might theoretically lead to the accidental tearing up of. It's amazing. It's truly amazing stuff. If you could be a plant, which plant would you be? Cactus. If I'm going to be a plant and thus I'm going to be slow and static, at the bare minimum I want some flipping defense on me, so 100% cactus. John, what tips would you give to someone who wants to start playing Crusader Kings 2? Ooh, okay, difficult one, because I probably am not the best player in the world at Crusader Kings 2. Like, I learnt a lot during my series, but I probably still have barely scratched the surface. It's a very big, complicated game. Okay, the first most important thing is, don't be afraid to fail, alright? You're going to make a lot of flipping mistakes. No matter how much reading up or how many tips you've got, you're going to make loads of mistakes at first. Just flip and roll with it. But, like, I guess if I could think about the things that I learnt most, treat your spy master well, marry very, very carefully indeed, and try and always be floating enough gold that if worst came to worst, you could actually hire the cheapest bunch of mercenaries in the game, just as an insurance policy against anyone trying anything stupid. Hi John, how's Tabby? Poor little Tabby is having a difficult week. Alright, so earlier this week, she had a bit of an upset stomach, so we called the vet and they said, don't worry about it, just leave her a few days, it's probably nothing to worry about. So a few days later, she still had a bit of an upset stomach, so that unfortunately meant that Tabby needed to go to the vet. Now, Tabby isn't really a cat that enjoys being picked up, to be honest. Like, you know, she'll sit next to you, and if you sit next to her, that's absolutely fine. But she's not really for being picked up or cuddled or being on a lap or anything like that. So she is not very keen on having to be picked up or encouraged or pushed into her little carry crate to actually get her over to the vet. So that wasn't a fun experience for her. Neither was the fact that, yeah, the vet was saying, hey, we're going to give her, like, some antibiotics and some steroids to see if that'll actually help out. So she needs to get shots and she needs to be force-fed some pills. And fortunately, now we can actually crumble the pill over her dinner. So we don't actually need to force-feed her any more pills. But she had to have that done to her and she didn't enjoy that as well. And at the same time, the vet just happened to notice, hey, she's got quite a build-up of earwax. Here are some ear droplets. Just drip those into her ear every day. And Tabby's not keen on having stuff dripped into her ear either. So right now, as far as Tabby's concerned, her life is very, very tough indeed. Because she's been put on plain food, and she's getting picked up, and people are dripping stuff in her ear, and in general, she's not having a fun time of it. But in all fairness, she's been very good about it. Though she's kind of sulked for a little bit off to one side away from where we can actually get to her to pet her. She has forgiven us very quickly and come and hung out with Claire in particular since all this has started. So she's dealing with it, but the poor thing is not having a good week. What's the best kind of bear in your opinion? Okay, I need to do some research on this one. So I'm going for the Malayan sun bear, which is apparently the smallest bear in existence. So, because it's quite small and like significantly smaller than me, even on its hind legs, that means you could like go and hug it and hang out with it with a minimal risk of being killed by it. I mean, you know, it's a bear, so it can probably still kill you, but like it's less likely to than other types of bears. And a similar bear-related question. Ella, you're weirdly obsessed with bears. This is getting odd. Shag, marry, kill for polar bear, black bear, and panda. Okay, we gotta game this right now. So, I believe black bears are by far the most common of those bears. Like, pandas and polar bears are definitely endangered. So we're going to have to kill the black bear, purely because that does the least damage to conservation efforts around the world. So that one's actually set aside. Now, the panda's the least likely to kill me, so I guess we marry that one, just because, you know, I'm likely to live longer. Meaning I just have to find a way to shag a polar bear once without dying, and then we're on easy street. Spot on. John, do you have any interesting statistics about the views, subs, etc. of the Fallout 76 video you can share? Yes, actually, I was just looking at these analytics. There is actually one interesting thing, which is not one of the ones you mentioned, but average view duration. How long, on average, a person watches the video for, which is kind of interesting, because there's no real reason why that would be anything other than flat. Because, you know, some people watch the whole thing, some people start watching then give up, some people watch for a little bit, then go away and have a break to actually continue it later. So on average, you wouldn't think that would change, but it actually does. So when the video first actually came out, like the day of its launch, the average view duration was 43 minutes and 45 seconds. Now, as time went on, that actually started dropping over the subsequent days. So the people who actually decided to watch it the moment it came out were the most excited for it, understandably, so they were more likely to watch it for longer. And then once you got to the people who only came to it a little bit later, but are probably still subscribers, at that point it started falling. The next day was down to 36 minutes, then 33, 33 again, but then it starts doing something interesting, which is, after that point, the people who are watching who are my subscribers are starting to become a smaller and smaller proportion of the total people viewing. And instead, more people who are being recommended the video in the sidebar and places like that, say the homepage, they start becoming a larger and larger percentage. And they have chosen to actively watch something from a creator they don't know because they're interested in the topic, meaning potentially they have a higher propensity to watch for longer. So all of a sudden, the average view duration has just gone up slightly to 34 minutes. That's the most recent bit of data I have. It's actually started trending up again. So yeah, potentially it seems like as time goes by, the average view duration will actually go up slightly, which is kind of cool. Where in America is American John from? Ooh, good question. Like, in my mind, American John, like, isn't actually really a cowboy, hence the terrible fake accent. Like, American John wishes that he was a cowboy, but actually isn't, so overcompensates by wearing ridiculously oversized hats and putting on the most ridiculous cowboy accent that he can imagine. So I don't think American John is actually from any of the places you'd associate with cowboys. I think American John is actually from, like, one of those US states where no one actually knows where it is. Like Minnesota. Nobody knows where Minnesota is. I think American John's from Minnesota. If I wanted to get a cat, do you think it's best to get one from a shelter or get a kitten? Kittens are adorable. I agree, but I have always been one for rescuing animals from shelters because so many animals need homes. And Tabby was about 10 years old when we got her and was in a shelter. And, we knew when we saw her because she was an older cat and she'd been through a bit of trauma, and thus she was a bit shy and nervous and skittish. She was much less likely to be adopted than certain other smaller, cuter kittens would be. So as a result of that, I really wanted Tabby because Tabby just needed a home and she needed a quiet place to retire. And, I've always had rescue dogs when I was younger, especially hounds. I think, hounds need rescuing a lot because, hounds they use for racing in particular, they have a very short working career, then they can't work anymore in terms of actually being racing hounds, so they just end up in shelters. So my favourite dog from when I was a kid was a hound that was rescued from a shelter. So I'm a big proponent of rescuing animals if you ever can. Because, kittens will always find homes, but animals in shelters sometimes struggle to. So that's just how I do it. Obviously, I don't want to cast shame or shade or whatever on anyone that does just kind of get a kitten from a well-regarded breeder who's all above board. Obviously, there are some dodgy breeders, but if it's a proper above-board breeder, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But if you can, do consider adopting animals from shelters because they need homes. John, your LA Noire series is one of my favourites. I'm curious why you never did the DLC cases, as they're usually the most highly rated among fans. The edition I had just didn't have them in. I just had a basic edition on the Xbox 360 that didn't have the DLC cases. One day I may well go back and do the DLC cases as little one-off specials, because why not, eh? John, I'm currently trying to write a 7,000-word third-year research project worth 25% of my degree and a 7,000-word dissertation at the same time. How did you survive third year of your degree? I'm desperate. Third year of my degree was actually pretty easy because I did a 4-year degree. So third year was, the end of second year exams were done. Fourth year exams were still a long way off. So just sit back, relax, chill out, drink mojitos. Everything's absolutely fine. Fourth year, that was a bit more on the stressful side. That was very stressful. I'm going to be honest, I'm probably not the best person to take notes from in this particular case because I probably did too much cramming. I probably left way too much revision till relatively the last minute and came up with some really intensive revision strategies. So I'm not really qualified to give you advice on this one. I mean, my personal way of preparing for written exams is to basically look over past papers dating back decades, if I can, look at every single question that has ever come up and try and group them into, vague themes, which works for classics because there's, a fairly limited corpus, so there's only so many questions that are likely to keep coming up. And because you're given so many choices in the papers that I did, it was very probable that if I just basically prepared, say, 15 or so vague, rough essay plans in certain directions, I could recycle some of those into actual answers to the questions that did come up with a little bit of personalization and tailoring. And the way I was able to memorize those essay plans was a very careful system of colouring and drawings and whatever. So basically, the moment my exams began, what I did is I opened up the exam paper, looked over the choices of questions I was able to answer. I'm talking about essay questions here, of course. And then figured out, okay, which 3 of these are closest to essays I have previously prepared. Mark those, get my rough working paper, and then immediately, while it's still fairly fresh in my memory, sketch out, as well as I can remember them, the essay plans I'd already prepared, and then use those essay plans to write the actual essays. And it seemed to work out. I'm not sure if that's, good, or if that's slightly cheating. It kind of feels like it's a slightly cheating way to do revision, but I just felt it was tactically competent, and it seemed to do the job. John, I'm currently translating Virgil's Aeneid for uni. I was wondering if you have any opinions on this work. Okay, prepare for my controversial hot take on a work that's 2 millennia old. You could remove books 7 to 11 from Virgil's Aeneid and basically nothing of value would be lost. Just run book 6 straight into book 12, put 5 lines at the beginning of book 12 to explain the stuff that happens in books 7 to 11, and you're done. Okay? You're just flipping done. I don't understand books 7 to 11. I genuinely don't. Fine, there's a couple of interesting moments in there, but just, why would you be inspired by the bit of the Iliad that's not very good. Like, just in case you're kind of unfamiliar, this is very high level, this is a real oversimplification. The first half of the Aeneid is loosely based on the Odyssey. The second half of the Aeneid is loosely based on the Iliad. Except it doesn't seem to actually be inspired by, like, the bits of the Iliad that people actually flipping like. Because the Iliad also contains a bunch of stuff that most people could probably take out without much of value being lost. Like, people like Book 1, Book 3, Book 4, Book 9, then skip quite a lot of books, actually. Skip loads of books. Go straight through to like 16 and 19 and 20 and 22 and 24 at that point. Everything's 100% fine. There's a lot of the Iliad you can also trim out without much of value being lost, to be honest. But yeah, too much of the Aeneid for my liking seems to be based on the books of the Iliad where there's just a lot of fighting and they're not particularly interesting to my mind. Oh, my controversial hot takes here. I'm casting shade on books of the Iliad and the Aeneid. Oh no. John, did you name Tabby after Tabby Star, or is it the other way around? Actually, when we adopted Tabby, she was already called Tabby. We did briefly consider renaming her, but that seemed harsh, and as she is literally a tabby cat, we are supposing that a child named her Tabby in a moment where there was a deep lack of creativity going on. So Tabby the tabby cat is just a tabby cat. That's why she's named. Though, of course, we do use her full name of Tabitha on all official documentation. John, I got Wargroove and I've been having a blast with it. However, I've never played Advance Wars and therefore suck at it. Do you have any tips or strategies for Wargroove and Advance Wars games in general? Okay, these games are very much about utilising speed bumps and choke points. Choke points are where you're going to win. It's like a total war game. If you can basically bottle up the enemy, then use your ranged units to absolutely annihilate them. And speed bumps is the idea of using cheap units to bottle up the enemy. And to do that effectively, you need to know which units are going to be able to survive a hit from every other sort of unit. So, for example, back in Advance Wars, you never wanted to use battlecopters to try and actually plug up a little choke point, because if the enemy had any anti-air, they would be able to take those out in one shot, and then they'd be able to push straight through. So the equivalent, harpies in Wargroove, you don't want to be using to actually block up. I find spearmen are excellent because I don't think anything can really kill a spearman in one hit. So getting like a line of spearmen next to a narrow choke point, whether that's a bridge, whether that's like, a single road with forest on either side where you've just got 3 spearmen just kind of blocking that up, and then some hunters behind them and some trebuchets at the rear, that can often slowly advance and take out just about everything. Just slowly push forward with nice cheap speed bumps in the form of spearmen at the front, and then just keep a never-ending line of hunters, of the odd ballista to cover yourself for air. Maybe just bring some mages in just for safety, for some more anti-air, because they're pretty powerful in general, and some trebuchets right to the rear, and you should be able to slowly push against just about anything. It won't work against a human, because a human will figure out what you're doing and be able to counter it, but against the AI, it worked back in Advance Wars, it seems to work in Wargroove as well. What's your opinion on the roadmap for Fallout 76? Are you happy with it, or did Bethesda not go far enough? I think it shows some moves in the right direction. The addition of the vending machines, I think in particular, is very, very good indeed. There's clearly a lot of new content coming, new game modes. The only thing that really worries me about it, which is the same thing I flagged at the end of the big Fallout 76 video, is it looks like the plan right now is to just put more and more and more content on the foundation they've already built. It feels like, they think they've got the game with patch 6 and patch 7 into a position where they're pretty happy with the fundamentals of it, and now the time and the focus is going to be spent on adding more and more content to it, which I do not agree is the right approach. I think they need to be thinking about big reworks of fundamental systems, or at the bare minimum, creating new alternative modes, like the survival mode they're discussing, that changes some big stuff just to see if any of those experiments pan out. Don't necessarily put them into the main game for everyone at first, but now we know they're willing to set up side modes in the form of survival mode, set up other experiments, just set aside some resource whose only job is to create new side modes that people are allowed to opt into to see if any of those experiments work any better, and let them take some stupid radical risks like the sort of stuff I was talking about. Not even necessarily the same stuff I was talking about, but set aside just a few members of your team to focus on wacky, stupid ideas that people can choose to optionally opt into if that's what they want to do. That's what I'd love to see. As I was reading the comments in the Fallout 76 video, I started to find it really easy to pick out new people just watching the video, and those of us who have been with you for years. I thought being able to pick that out so easily really solidified the fact you've built a really strong community that surrounds you at all things MATN. I was wondering if you were able to see the difference in the commenters as well. I absolutely can, and I recognise many usernames that are regular commentators, just like I recognise many of the regulars who are on Patreon, and the people who attend the live streams, and on the Discord, and all the rest of it. You know, I recognise the community regulars, absolutely. But I absolutely agree that you can also spot the people who have been hanging around for a bit versus those that don't. But the actual really interesting one for me for the Fallout 76 was actually being able to spot the people who watched the video and then commented versus the people who watched a certain amount of the video and then just started commenting preemptively because they just wanted to get to their point and comment nice and early. And my favourite game to play was looking at a comment and trying to figure out, okay, how many minutes of this video have you watched before you decided to jump in and comment? Did you get to, chapter 1? Did you make it to chapter 2? Oh, you definitely didn't make it to chapter 3, did you? That was my favourite game to play with the comments of Fallout 76. But I think you're right, you can absolutely tell the difference between the community regulars and newcomers. Of course, we're very open to newcomers, absolutely. Like, newcomers are great. I really hope we get plenty of newcomers because, that's literally the only way the community grows. But it is great that we do have such a strong group of regulars who are really active commenters and community members. It's great. It's absolutely wonderful. John, have you considered doing more series where you don't take games too seriously, like Deadly Premonition or Fallout Kill Everything? Yes, I have, but it's something I need to be really careful with. It's something that I actually do keep in mind. Because the thing is, a ridiculous game like a sweary game, I think that's absolutely fine. And a roleplay experience like Fallout Kill Everything, that's absolutely fine. And a one-off where I take a game not too seriously, that's generally okay. But when there's an entire series where you're not taking a game that seriously, there's two risks, which is if you're being very flippant and it feels like you're not really getting into it and accepting the game for what it is, some people don't enjoy that as much. And the other problem is, if that game has fans, and those fans feel like you're not taking the game as seriously as you should be, those fans can get really annoyed. They can get very, very annoyed indeed. So I try and be careful about that sort of thing. Like, when I actually don't take a game too seriously, I try and keep it, very light-hearted and flippant, but I don't mock the game. It's a very difficult thing to get the balance right on. So never say never, but I don't have a plan for a Deadly Premonition series coming up imminently, or a series like that, I mean. John, following on from the Fallout 76 video, would you maybe be interested in making a series of something similar, more like your video on Arkham Asylum, following up on what you said about not enjoying the story mode of Red Dead 2, for example? Videos much shorter than the Fallout 76 critique, but providing a bit more of a review and a look at the game's mechanics that take place on a playthrough. I would potentially be very interested in doing that sort of thing. They are huge amounts of work. On Red Dead 2 in particular, I don't have much interest in doing that because there's actually already a video that does that very, very well indeed, which is Nakey Jakey's video on Red Dead 2 does a really good job, actually. That kind of sums up a lot of my thoughts, which is, I love the world, it's beautiful, it's interesting, it's compelling, I love just bumbling around in it, but I don't really enjoy the actual missions. I don't enjoy the actual missions because they're so linear and so structured, and that feels so weird to me in a big open world game with lots of big open environments that I just don't seem to have much freedom to do things my way. So that's what kind of puts me off the actual story missions there, even though I think the game itself is a really fascinating work of art. It's brilliant and it's beautiful and it's wonderful and I enjoy just bumbling around in it. But I can't just make a series out of bumbling around in a game and never making any actual progress in it. And the progress is absolutely gated behind the mission. You cannot progress to the next area, the next camp, various upgrades, all gated behind progress in the story missions, which I find is a real shame. It would be nice if you could make some progress by doing other things around the world, just by, say, leveling up your character, by doing whatever, and then you can actually bypass certain plot missions and have to do fewer of them because you could just do things your own way instead. I would have liked that a lot better. So that particular question, I think, has already been well answered. There's a very good look at that sort of thing. I would love to do that sort of thing, but I'm also very cautious about that sort of thing, because especially something like that, like, I don't really talk about it at length, for the most part, because I don't really like courting controversy on the channel for the most part. I don't really want to stick my head out of the trenches and say, hey, the game that everybody in the world seems to love that's got 10 out of 10s across the board, I'm not 100% sure about some of the core design decisions of that game, actually. That seems like a bad idea. I don't really want to do that, because I feel like some people would be very angry at me if I did that. And, you know, kind of the whole point of the channel when I originally set it up is I wanted it to be a positive, happy channel. You know, the idea if you've not got something nice to say, don't say anything at all. So these days I tend to stick to that pretty thoroughly. I only really cover games that I love, and if there's a game that I think is really interesting, but there's parts of it I don't enjoy, I'll cover it briefly, but I won't do a full playthrough. Full playthroughs are kind of reserved for stuff that I really love, that I absolutely flipping adore. I want this to be a positive, happy place. That's what I kind of built here. So if I were to do deep dives, it would be for the most part into stuff that I loved, which is why the first big mega video was Fallout 3 is better than you think, because I wanted to talk about how much I love in Fallout 3. And of course I want to do the same thing in Fallout 4. Now I know that seems like an odd thing to say when we're talking about Fallout 76 recently, and obviously that was a big critique video, but it was constructive critique. Like, I would never do a big ranty video or anything. If I was ever doing a video, it would be a critique video. But even that, some communities are more or less open to critique. I think the Fallout community is very open to critique of Fallout 76, that's detailed analysis, because a large part of that community, even the ones that, you know, quite like 76, and I quite like 76, are open to the fact there are problems and it could be better than it is. Whereas Red Dead 2, that seems to maybe be to some people a bit of a sacred cow, where criticising it is deemed controversial, and I wouldn't really want to kick that hornet's nest, to be honest. I'm very happy just leaving that one alone. So I'd love to do some more things like that, but they'd probably be positive things, discussing why I like a game. And actually, there was one of those just the other night. My Gone Home video was, in some ways, kind of, you know, a replay, because I'd already played the game, I know what happens in it. It was more about me discussing why I thought that game is so interesting in terms of its narrative and its meta-narrative, that sort of thing. And I was very tempted to call that video Gone Home is Better Than You Think, but I thought, you know what, this isn't long enough or in-depth enough or interesting enough to actually be called that. So, like, you know, I was tempted though. I was tempted to make that video into Gone Home is Better Than You Think, because I thought that would have been very, very cool indeed. So that's kind of what that video was, which is why it was a replay and it was talking, you know, in depth about the meta-narrative context of how the game works and all of that stuff. So, yeah, I'd like to make more stuff than that, and Gone Home was maybe a bit of a glance at what that sort of thing might look like. And I am planning to do a shorter little kind of video essay thing, as I've been discussing, before Fallout 4 is Better Than You Think. So, yeah, there's definitely plans in mind for that sort of thing, because those can be really helpful to the channel. Those can be, you know, shared and popular and turn out to do very, very well indeed, compared to just, like, you know, a normal video, for example. So, yeah, absolutely. But I'm very careful, because I wouldn't really want to do one that, you know, attracts the ire of certain communities who are very defensive about their game. John, how are you? Still slightly tired, but recovering nicely from the Fallout 76 video, thanks for asking. How's Claire? She's good. She's got British citizenship now. That got sorted out this last week, so now we can't deport her after Brexit. So, you know, there's positives and negatives there. How's Tabby? As I say, having a bit of a difficult week, unfortunately, but seems to be on the mend, so hopefully she'll be fine again soon. Do you think you'll play more Eastshade? Very likely I will. Not sure if it'll be a video, but at bare minimum, I will definitely finish it myself. Honestly, when I was just talking a second ago about, say, you know, Gone Home is Better Than You Think, Eastshade would be an excellent candidate for Eastshade is Better Than You Think, because it's a short game, it's fairly limited in scope, but I think it does stuff incredibly well. It's really, really damn interesting. So Eastshade would be an excellent candidate for a shorter little, hey, let's discuss why this game is bloody amazing sort of video. During the Eastshade livestream, you mentioned a letter or email from Bethesda, and a lot of jokes were made about it in chat, like you were banned from Fallout 76. I just wondered if you're allowed to share what they actually said. There was no email. That was just a throwaway joke because of the person who got the email banning them for the 900 hours thing. I haven't actually received any communications from Bethesda recently, aside from just, like, you know, the normal ones everyone gets about events that are happening and whatever. So that was just a throwaway joke. There was no actual email. John, I know you're a fan of Greek stories and myths, and wondered whether you'd heard of or read Stephen Fry's Mythos and subsequent Heroes, Mortals and Monsters, Quests and Adventures. I am familiar with Stephen Fry's Mythos, Heroes, Mortals and Monsters. No, that one's news to me. But I was very much aware, I kind of read some reviews when it was fresh out of Stephen Fry's Mythos. It sounds interesting. I haven't read it myself. I read something very interesting once upon a time. What was it called? Flip, there was a similar idea, which was basically a novel of putting the Greek gods into the modern age, a kind of a retelling like that. Blimey heck, I need to remember what it was called. Hang on. Here we go. Gods Behaving Badly by Marie Phillips of 2008. I read that very soon after it came out. Interesting read. Arguably feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. Some of the characterization feels a little two-dimensional. I would have, preferred it to go a bit more in depth about some of the gods. But it's certainly funny in places. Might be worth a look-see if you're into that sort of thing. John, I've been wondering whether or not you consciously changed the way you talk to be more easily understood by non-Britons. Not so much the way I talk, but I have noticed I start using certain American spellings. Like, I will typically now spell armor without a U. So that's interesting. But colour gets to keep its U, alright? I'm not taking the U out of colour, but I will routinely take the U out of armour when I'm talking about weapons and armour in Fallout, for example. So yeah, I'm in a bit of a weird place there. Sometimes I amend my spellings to be Americanised, sometimes I don't, and I'm not quite sure if I have any rules about that. John, I noticed in the Drunk livestream that you have to synchronise your mic audio to the video. Do you not record your audio with OBS alongside the game audio? If not, why not? No, I don't. When I'm capturing game audio, I will only capture the video and the game audio together as one thing, and an entirely separate audio track, I'll be capturing my voice. That's just for the sake of audio mixing, because games are very, very different volumes. Some games' soundtracks are very quiet, some games' soundtracks get very, very loud indeed. And at various points during the video, I might want my voice to be more or less prominent next to the game's audio. So on certain occasions, I might want the game to be a bit louder or quieter. So if I've got them on separate audio tracks, it's much easier to make changes on the fly to the audio mix. Whereas, say, if I were to capture all of it in OBS onto a single track, then if the game audio were just a bit louder than I thought it was going to be, there's literally no way for me to fix that because the tracks are already mixed together. So at that point, I'd just be stuck with a video where my voice would be difficult to hear over the game audio just because the game audio is louder than you expect. And sometimes games just have really loud audio for no well-explained reason. So that's why I do that. It's just for the ease of audio mixing down the line. John, the Fallout series has many factions, but what faction would you create and what would this new faction's goals and morals be? Okay, so I'd add Canadian Mounties into Fallout. Because while it's never, dwelt upon in huge detail, we do know that going right back to the original Fallout 1 game, America at one point, just pre-war, did invade and occupy Canada and did some, pretty nasty war crimes. They executed Canadians in the streets and all of that. So I would like, post-apocalypse, the Canadian Mounties to be one of the major military forces in the world, and they have decided to counter-invade America, alright? And they come in on their mighty rad mooses, riding into America. They are fearsome, they are terrifying, but they're a civilizing force, alright? They mean well, but they're willing to put the boot down when they feel like they need to. They won't tolerate much in the way of dissent, but if you're willing to just, quietly play by their rules, be polite, look both ways before you cross the street, all of that good stuff, you can actually live a fairly nice, peaceful, prosperous life inside a Mountie settlement. So they're kind of like, a not as overtly evil version of the Legion. Canadian polite Legion, basically. If you were to live in a post-apocalyptic society, what role or job would you want to play in the rebuilt society? Oh, I'm really not looking forward to the post-apocalypse if that happens, because I have no practical skills. I'm very useless at really practical stuff. When we get IKEA furniture in, Claire has to be the one that builds it, because I'm terrible at that sort of thing. So I'm not going to be very useful in the post-apocalypse. Certain post-apocalyptic stories, however, do suggest that, storytellers in the oral tradition might actually be important again. Remember Reign of Fire? Anyone other than me remember Reign of Fire? It was a film about, some guy who interrupted, some dragon eggs in the London Underground or something, and then dragons conquered the world, and humans had to go back to, well, it was kind of medieval times, but they had some modern technology too. And basically there wasn't very many of them. But storyteller seemed to be an important thing. Like, there was no TV or radio or anything, so the kids would gather around a storyteller who would, do voices and, act out some of the emotions and tell them stories and all of that sort of thing. I think I'd be good at that, because I've got a very good memory. So I think I'd be good at kind of remembering stories. And when my nieces and nephews were young, I was hotly in demand for reading the bedtime story, because I would always act out bits of it and do the voices. It would be very dramatic, which, as sometimes my siblings pointed out to me, wasn't really the point, because the bedtime story is supposed to be calming and relaxing so the kids can fall to sleep. And sometimes I made the bedtime story so exciting that it kind of didn't do that. So there was a bit of a problem there. But still, I think I'm quite good at that sort of thing. And, I do a lot of roleplay stuff in the series. So if there's a chance to be a travelling bard who kind of, tries to bring back the oral tradition, hopefully I can do that. And if that's not valued, I'd probably just get eaten by cannibals. Oh, it's another shag, marry, kill. Cato, Julius Caesar, and Pompey Magnus. Oh, blimey. Okay, those are some big, complex historical figures with a lot to unpick. But here's the must. I'm gonna marry Cato, because the thing about Cato is Cicero loved Cato, and I love Cicero. So therefore, I love Cato. Cato's awesome, defender of the Republic. Very mixed legacy anyway, because he was also really, really, really pro-aristocracy and not so pro-people. But he was a defender of the Republic, and Cicero loved him, and that's good enough for me. So I'm marrying Cato, and I shall keep him safe. Which leaves Julius Caesar and Pompey Magnus. Now, I feel like I kind of have to kill Julius Caesar, because that's just history. He did get himself killed, but then so did Pompey Magnus, I suppose. But then, the thing about Julius Caesar is he did kind of break the Republic, bring in the Empire pretty much. The Empire didn't end well for a lot of people, actually, and maybe if he hadn't been around, but then that's not fair, because the Republic was already collapsing and massively top-heavy and not really working and corrupt and stodgy and diseased by that point. So, can you really blame Julius Caesar for finishing it off and trying to arrange something different? But then again, Julius Caesar didn't really start the emperor. He was just dictator for life, and dictators were a perfectly legitimate constitutional part of the Roman Republican system. It's just that he did it for longer, but then okay, I'm just going to kill Julius Caesar and shag Pompey Magnus, because I've always felt a bit sorry for Pompey Magnus. I feel like, history didn't really give him a fair hearing when he's actually a kind of cool, interesting character. But I'm marrying Cato, because Cato's awesome, because Cicero says so. John, in the 76 video, why did you skip your normal intro, but use the classic outro? I skipped the normal intro just because I figured there was a good chance a whole bunch of people, this would be their first exposure to the channel. So me kind of saying my name and the channel and giving a bit of a meandering intro doesn't really help those people. I want to actually get into the meat of the argument as fast as possible, in order that people who have just kind of clicked on this from the suggestions bar or the homepage or whatever don't immediately click away, because it hasn't got to anything interesting. So I want to get into the arguments as fast as possible. By the end of the video, anyone who's got to the end is already pretty well engaged, so I'm happy to have the conventional outro right there. So not a particularly complex reasoning there, it was just that. Also, if you could make just one of your proposed changes happen immediately, which one would you pick? Difficult to say, because plenty of them don't work independently, they depend on each other. I'd probably say vendor bots as opposed to the vending machines that Bethesda were talking about. I think actual player built and run vendor bots would at least help a player run economy start to exist, which would be very, very nice indeed. Although I suppose actually I could just say, change over the server system to have characters tied to particular servers, because then at the bare minimum you do have some form of permanence, which would be nice. John, did you ever find the recording under the entrance bridge in the Enclave vault? No, I didn't. After I'm done recording this, I shall go dig around for that thing, because I don't know what that is. John, have you ever considered as a challenge run for any grand strategy games, my side never starts a war, or something to that effect? That would be interesting, because technically that is actually one of the rules you can go for in Stellaris. If you play fanatical pacifist, you are only allowed to take part in defensive wars. You can't even do liberation wars. I think if you're part of a defensive pact, you can be pulled into someone else's offensive war, but I'd need to double check that. But yeah, just slight pacifists can't actually do conquest wars, but they can actually do liberation wars, whereas, fanatical pacifists can only go to war if they are attacked directly, or if they're pulled into war as a result of... Oh, actually, are you allowed to vote in favour of someone else's proposed war inside a federation if you're fanatical pacifist? I need to look into this, because I never play as pacifist in Stellaris, because it just isn't very strong, to be honest. Like, I think these days pacifists get bonus admin cap, which is a very feeble compensation for not being able to go to war when so much of that game is decided by war. So, I feel like pacifist needs to have some much bigger buffs to offset the fact that, they basically can't attack anyone else. So, I'm not sure it would necessarily be that interesting in Stellaris, but it might be worth a look-see at in some of the Total War games, for example. I'm curious where the origin of your name, Many a True Nerd, comes from. Now this is well-known history. It's based on the common modern rendering of the idiom in Chaucer, many a true word is spoken in jest. Many a true nerd instead of many a true word. Also, I'm curious if you have any generic playthroughs or series of Fallout 3 or New Vegas planned. Not at this exact moment in time, but there is still a lot of chatter and rumour milling going on about a remastered edition of Fallout 3. If Fallout 3 ever did get a remastered edition, that would probably be an excellent time for me to do just like, a big, full, exhaustive Fallout 3 playthrough without any particular rule sets going on. There would maybe be a little bit more like my Fallout New Vegas Survival Mode series. There was really a full, exhaustive look at every fun little thing in the game. So that'd probably be what I would do there. Would you consider making a playlist for all of your live streams so they're easier to find? That is a good point. They could probably do with their own live stream. I will try and remember to make one of those this week. How did you enjoy your reread of The Colour of Magic? Because yes, I was actually rereading some Pratchett recently. I really enjoyed The Colour of Magic, actually. I remember not being thrilled about it when I first read it, but actually, I think it's really solid. I think it's actually aged very, very nicely indeed. In fact, I think I liked The Colour of Magic more than I liked The Light Fantastic. I mean, sure, it's a little bit all over the place, but it's just got that Pratchett magic, doesn't it? And in some ways, I like the fact it's got a very simple structure to it. It's just a very simple journey narrative after the opening when they get out of the city. It's very, very cool indeed. It's almost a bit Odyssey-ish. John, since you seem to love Civ 6 and that sort of thing, any chance in exploring Alpha Centauri, the original, not the reboot? Well, I'm always on the lookout for new, big, grand strategy, lovely things, so I don't have it on the actual schedule right now, but it is definitely a candidate to be looked at in the future. I don't know exactly when. There's a few things I want to look at ahead of that in terms of both Creative Assembly and Paradox, but absolutely, at some point it will definitely be covered. It's a very prime candidate. John, which do you think is stronger, the hatred of Fallout fans towards Fallout or that of Star Wars fans towards Star Wars? I'd say the Star Wars fandom hatred feels a little bit more extreme these days, actually. I definitely think there's more controversy and back and forth about Star Wars than there is about Fallout, because Fallout 76, actually, I believe, has quite a large number of people who are just fine with it. They don't think it's the best game, they don't think it's as good as Fallout New Vegas, they don't think it's as good as the old Fallouts or whatever, but they're fine with it. I think most people are pretty fine with it. There is absolutely a vocal group of people who are very, very virulently against it, but I don't think the general average opinion against Fallout 76 is as strong as you might believe from some of the narrative you see online. Were people in the ancient world as obsessed with post-apocalyptic stories as they are now, or is this a relatively new thing? Not really, actually. In fact, actually, it's the reverse. In a lot of ancient stories, the obsession is with the past, because to the ancient Greek mindset, they felt like they were living in a very degraded age, where things weren't as good as they used to be. And the age when there were heroes and the active intervention of gods and whatever, they thought of that as the golden age. That was a really wonderful time, and that's where pretty much all their stories are set. In fact, I'm trying to think of like a single bit of literature in the ancient world that is like set in the future. Like, you know, proposing what things might be like going forwards. And I can't think of any. Like, some of the plays of Aristophanes do propose, like, alternate societies, but they never suggest what society is going to be like. They're simply focusing on what a fantastical alternative society set in the present might be like. But overwhelmingly, Greek storytelling focuses on the past, and Roman storytelling very much does the same sort of thing as well. There's a lot more contemporary stuff in Roman. So, a lot of Roman stuff set in the present and a bit in the past. Loads of Greek stuff set in the past, a bit in the present. I'm struggling to think of a single example of anything looking forward. So it's not just post-apocalyptic stuff, it's anything set in the future at all. John, how on earth did you manage to get to know Fallout 76 this well? Basically, huge amounts of research. Huge amounts of research. Like, weeks of work went into that video. Absolutely weeks of work. Reading around it, trying to find other people's accounts of it, trying to find people who've gone diving into the code and discovered the exact mechanics for how things work and all of that sort of thing. I also really like a follow-up point in your question where you say, I mean, this really goes past Wikipedia level stuff. You're not wrong. You see, there's a group of Fallout wikis that actually contain detailed breakdowns of the mechanics in each of the Fallout games, but the people who are fans who maintain those wikis, it looks like none of them enjoyed Fallout 76, because if you kind of look at, say, certain pages about mechanics that cover the mechanics in each game, the sections on the mechanics in Fallout 76 are often literally empty or have extremely basic or inaccurate information in them. So yeah, unfortunately, the people who maintain the wikis just didn't care enough about Fallout 76 to actually bother updating the wikis with up-to-date information or find the information to do so. So plenty of that information I had to actually either get myself through huge amounts of trial and error or find obscure small posts on the internet where someone went code diving and actually found the information, and I was able to find, like, sometimes I was getting information out of Google Docs. And some of this information, because it wasn't really verified, it was just one person posting this, I needed to go into the game and verify it myself and just do some tests to make sure that what I was seeing synced up with what I was reading online, which slowed down the production of that video even more. So when you're saying it's beyond Wikipedia level, you're not kidding. Like, there's information inside that video that is not in any of the Fallout wikis, because the Fallout wikis are actually not very thorough for Fallout 76 at all. Considering your love for Fallout and XCOM, how is it you haven't played Wasteland 2 yet? An excellent question. One day, there will absolutely be a Wasteland 2 series. I do not know when, but 100% I agree it's a great fit for the channel. It will happen one day. What would Tabby's special stats be? So Tabby as a Fallout 4 character would have Strength of 1, Perception of 4, because when you get anywhere near her, you can just kind of see her eyes open a little bit just to keep an eye on you. So she just sometimes go to sleep and start snoring, so she's not that perceptive, but she's a bit perceptive. Perception of 4. Endurance of 1, because she's a great big wuss. Charisma of 10, because she's so fluffy and me and Claire love her so much. Intelligence of 1, because she's not the cleverest cat in the world. Claire sometimes suspects she is. I don't think that's true. Agility of 1, because she's extremely lazy. And luck of 10, because after a bit of a rough few years when she got lost on the street, she found her way to me and Claire. So I think now she's got a very good life with 2 humans that spoil her rotten, so she's very, very lucky indeed. You mentioned you used a lot of footage for the Fallout 76 video. How much of that footage was from previous runs versus fresh footage? It was 100% fresh, if I recall correctly. I don't think there was a single bit of reused footage. Am I lying? Okay, I'm lying a tiny bit. I actually used a tiny bit of footage from my own videos in, hang on, where was it? It was Fallout 76 Part 20 and Part 22. There's like 10 seconds from both of them, which I believe was footage of the Flatwoods monster when I took it out in the mire, and I can't remember what the other one was. And I believe there's there's a cutaway of like 3 seconds to the very first video I made of the Xbox One beta, and that's there because I commented that Flatwoods was very, very bustling on launch day, so I just had like a 3-second cutaway to what the map looked like with everybody in Flatwoods on the beta's launch day. So those are the only bits of recycled footage. Everything else was recorded new, because footage is big. Like, if I record for a few hours, that might be like 100 gigabytes of footage potentially. So I can't keep all that around. Like, I've got terabytes of storage built into this PC, but if I'm doing that every day, that's going to get filled up pretty quickly anyway. So all of the base footage from Fallout 76 was already deleted. That was already gone. So all of it needs to be recorded from scratch. But that didn't really matter. It wasn't a mistake on my part, because all of that footage wouldn't have been that useful to me anyway, because I wouldn't have known what was where. It would have just been like, 60, 70, whatever hours of footage with no actual marks in it for me to know what was where. So it might have been useful for generic background footage, but finding a specific shot in that would have been so slow. It's faster to just go in and record it again from scratch. So yeah, I'd say 99.9% of that video is all newly recorded footage. Oh, and as you pointed out, that is also true for the Fallout 1, Fallout 2, Fallout 3, and Fallout New Vegas footage. All of that was new as well. I did, however, not have to create any new characters. It was all done between my main character and Steve, the livestream character. I didn't actually need a new character beyond that. And in terms of the total number of hours all of that took, I don't know, because it was recorded in lots of little bits and pieces. And while I was editing it together, I realised, oh yeah, I'd probably benefit from having this shot. So I just loaded up the game and recorded like another few minutes of a particular shot. Sometimes those shots took some setup. So, I mean, it's gotta be at least 20 hours of footage recording. But that's not the majority of the time that was spent. The majority of the time that was spent was editing it all together and scripting it in the first place. Bethesda calls you up and asks you to conceptualize a new Fallout game from scratch, but you have to move to Maryland for an indeterminate amount of time. Deal. Also, they get to remove one toe or finger of your choice for some reason. Okay, even before we get to them cutting off bits of my body for no well-explained reason, I'd probably say no, for the simple reason I'm not a game designer. Alright, I'm throwing out all sorts of stupid ideas in my Fallout 76 video, but all of that's probably completely unworkable. Like, there are probably very good reasons Bethesda didn't do those things, or didn't do them in the way I suggested. What I suggested is very likely, technically impossible. It probably can't be done. Regardless of which engine you're using, it's probably wildly impractical, or would have taken years more to develop, and would have been less popular, because plenty of people probably didn't want a hardcore Fallout survival experience. I'm fully aware, and I acknowledge in the video, I'm in a minority there. So, the thing is, I'd be a terrible pick to design a Fallout game from scratch, because I'd just be randomly throwing ideas out there. And there's actually some interesting case studies from the 90s of this sort of thing, where people who had a couple of big hits, so like, say for example, John Romero, who had some big hits in the 90s, went on to basically just found his own studio, and turned out to be an absolutely terrible project lead, because he just basically kept throwing out wacky ideas and everything kept changing. And in the end, we end up with messes like Daikatana and Duke Nukem Forever, when you have really bad leadership in terms of lead designer roles, where people can't decide what the hell they're doing and keep changing their flipping mind, and the spec keeps moving and the goalposts keep moving. So basically, I'd be a terrible designer. Probably in the end, I'd come up with a worse Fallout game than Fallout 76, because I'm not experienced and skilled as a game designer, so probably best to leave it to them. What's been the biggest challenge in planning for Fallout 4 You Only Live Once? RADS, the new RADS system. Because, of course, it's not just a case of trying to minimize damage anymore. It's the fact that I know I'm going to be taking RADs, because RADs are totally unavoidable at one point. So I need to plot the route in such a way as places where I am likely to take damage are done prior to places where I am guaranteed to take RADs. But then the route I've got planned has to diverge, because if I make it through a certain area without taking any damage whatsoever, then going into radiation would be lunacy, because I'm not just getting RADs, I'm sacrificing active hit points. Whereas if I've got hit points that are lower than my RAD meter, then basically those RADs are freebies, because I'm not sacrificing any hit points whatsoever. So it's not just a route anymore, it's a diverging route, which basically has to constantly shift depending on how much damage I have or haven't taken at various points. That's why it's taking so long to plan, because it's not just a single route anymore, it's effectively a choose-your-own-adventure novel. Also, why are you thinking of doing Fallout 4 You Only Live Once in survival mode? New Vegas You Only Live Once was not done in hardcore mode. It's because, to me, Fallout 4 survival mode feels like the most complete version. Like, to me, these days, Fallout 4 without survival mode just feels incomplete. Like, survival mode feels like how Fallout 4 should be. Plus, it is the hardest difficulty. It feels like the right way to do it. It just feels like it's more interesting. I just think it's a more interesting experience. Now, I've already discussed, we're going to have to mod the game to get rid of, say, auto healing on level up, so we can actually have a real health counter and we don't have to bother trying to figure out what the hell the true health counter is saying anymore. All of that good stuff. So we'll have to make some tweaks, like the infection. Is it infection? The one that causes damage over time. I think it's infection. We have to remove that from the game. If you just happen to randomly draw that, basically that's the run as good as over. So we have to mod that out. So we have to make some changes, and I'll make some decisions nearer to the time as to exactly what stays in and what stays out. The key thing is I just want it to be as entertaining as possible. And I think survival is likely to do that better than not survival. Random fair use question. If someone were to make a video essay about a video game but didn't have the ability to capture footage themselves, would they be able to use MATN footage, credited of course instead? If this would normally violate fair use, is it the sort of thing you would give your viewers permission to do? It's always polite to ask, but it has actually come up before. People have asked me, can I use a snippet of your footage for X, Y, and Z? And typically I say, absolutely, that's fine, but so there's not two identical versions going on, I want some form of on-screen credit over it, whether that just be like, just little things like many a true nerd, or like, a channel URL, like on screen at all times, or if people ask, I can send them a little kind of like transparent logo for the channel that they can kind of put on as a watermark, that sort of thing. So yeah, for the most part, I'm absolutely fine for that sort of thing, as long as it's properly credited. John, I'd like to start reading some of the ancient epics soon. I was wondering if you had any suggestions on what to read first for someone who hasn't read anything. The Iliad is a perfectly good place to start because being as it is a very early work, like it does literally have sections that assume the reader might not know anything and might need reminding about a few things. Like, there's bits that make no sense, like Priam, 9 years into his war, doesn't need to have someone tell him who the armies he's facing are and who he's actually fighting. He should probably know this. But, just so the audience is caught up in case they don't know, Priam has a bit of a senior moment very early on in the Iliad, and he has to have the enemy armies pointed out to him one by one, which is kind of funny. But, actually, the Iliad's a perfectly good place to start. I recommend Martin Hammond's translation. I think it's a very accessible translation that still manages to get across a lot of what's in the Greek. That's a very good place to start. Are you planning to return to Fallout 76 with the new updates, Wild Appalachia and Nuclear Winter? Absolutely, will be doing so, but I'm not planning to do a new series or anything. It'll be like one-offs covering the new content, unless they're like absolutely massive transformational stuff. But even then, it would probably just be like a single week mini-series, not a full new series. What did you and Claire do for Valentine's Day? Absolutely nothing. Nothing whatsoever. Claire doesn't like the idea of Valentine's Day. She finds it ridiculous and cheesy and over the top. So, I looked up what else happens on February 14th, and it turned out that Oregon Statehood Day is on February 14th. So, I just went out and got her favourite coffee, brought it home to her, and told her, Happy Oregon Statehood Day, here you go. So, I tried to sneak a little something in at least. With Darkest Dungeon 2 just being announced, do you have any plans to check out the original? Absolutely. Often games that I just haven't really got round to, shortly before the sequel comes out is an excellent time for me to do that, just like we had Lucy at Metro 2033, just before Exodus, shortly before Darkest Dungeon 2 at the absolute latest, we'll go back and look at the original, absolutely. I just finished a couple of items on my video game bucket list, and one of them was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. Would you ever consider doing a review or playthrough of the KOTORs? Absolutely, I think that'd be excellent fits for the channel, so at some point or another, that is very, very likely indeed. Classics with John using Assassin's Creed Odyssey? It's entirely possible, at some point, because we didn't get review code. Like, when Odyssey's massively on sale, we'll pick it up and we'll probably do some form of stupid historical, mythy, why this is all wrong or why this is all right thing. It'll be great. John, you seem to be very pleased with your Palpatine impression. Why, yes, I am. Would you consider playing a Star Wars strategy game like Empire at War while role-playing as the Emperor? Probably not the whole thing, because it's quite hard on my throat, but Empire at War's Gold Edition was just added to Origin as one of the free Vault games. So I did download it. I don't actually have a date for it or anything, but I wouldn't be too surprised to see it sooner rather than later as a mini-series. John, in a recent livestream, you said you were worried that Sony and DC would learn the wrong lessons from the success of Venom and Aquaman. Can you explain what you meant by that? Oh, okay. Incoming controversial opinions. Alright. Venom and Aquaman are slightly ludicrous on toast. Now, I don't consider that fundamentally a bad thing. Not at all. Ludicrous on toast can be absolutely great. Just the other day, had a blast of a time with Star Wars The Force Unleashed, and that is absolutely ludicrous on toast. And I'll tell you what, for DC, anything's better than the grim, dark, weird interpretation that they've had of Superman so far. So if they basically figure out that something that's bright and colourful and slightly ludicrous is the way to go, that's definitely a step in the right direction. But I'm not convinced Venom and Aquaman are actually necessarily that good. They're entertaining enough and they're ludicrous and they're bright and colourful and showy. I'm not convinced they're actually that good, though. I know, no, there's going to be people who are really angry at me for saying this. So, I think the wrong lessons that they might learn would be, if Venom and Aquaman make a huge amount of money, and they have, then they'll say, okay, that's the new template. And I think possibly the reason Venom and Aquaman did very well was they were just very different to what else was actually out there. But I suspect DC and Sony will look at them and say, okay, like that, but more. And honestly, if they decide to just take, like, you know, ridiculous, bright, colourful ludicrousness of Aquaman and say, okay, that's what the next Batman film's going to be, I'm totally 100% on board with that. But I'm just slightly worried that rather than trying to make better films, they're now just going to try and make ludicrous films to cash in on the success of Venom and Aquaman. That's what I'm worried about a little bit. John, what are some games that Roman and ancient Greek children played? It's a bit hard for us to say because there's not a huge amount of written evidence talking about this. We do know of certain things because of archaeological finds. For example, like there are various, not really dice games, but sort of dice games, which appear to have involved knuckle bones. So knuckle bones we know were used in some form of games of chance and dice and whatever, but for some of these games we don't actually know the rules. But we believe that games that we might recognise as dice games were things that were commonly played. How much money would someone have to pay you to retire from working any sort of job? Someone's actually replied to this one. They've got it absolutely right. No amount possible. John's a workaholic. I don't like the term workaholic, but I do think that I'd be bored if I wasn't doing anything. I'd get really, really damn bored. I mean, bear in mind, what I'm doing right now, the YouTube stuff, I originally started doing that as a hobby, just to chill out and relax while I was doing an unrelated job. And then I just started doing it so flipping much and so obsessively that it actually became successful and I had to quit my job to do it instead. So that's just kind of how I roll, unfortunately. I do indeed strongly suspect that, yeah, no matter how much money you paid me, I'd always have to do something. Like, maybe I'd take the money, but then I'd accidentally find myself, like, you know, starting a hobby and accidentally turning that hobby into yet another new career, kind of by accident. Is there an animal species that's killed more humans than humans have killed it? Okay, I'm not actually a zoologist. You can't just ask literally any detailed question on any topic and have me answer, because sometimes I won't know because they're not my area of expertise. I mean, if I had to guess, maybe hippos? Because I'm told that hippos are nasty bastards that actually kill quite a lot of humans, but you don't really hear about, like, poachers going after hunters or people who are hunting on safaris going after hippos. So I feel like maybe not that many hippos have been killed, but quite a few humans have been killed by hippos. So I'm gonna guess hippo. That's the best estimate I've got. John, what would your wishes be for the next generation of Pokemon? Well, I have heard it's set in, like, you know, a vaguely United Kingdom-y sort of environment. So as many stupid regional jokes that only British people will get as possible. Just, like, keep shoveling them in, I'll be flippin' happy. I'm so excited for the fact it's UK-based, by the way. Like, previously, I could totally take or leave the next generation of Pokemon games, but now, full serious, guaranteed, every time. John, I was wondering if there's a sizable East Asian community in your fan base whose mother tongue is not necessarily English. Interesting. Let's have a little dig into the actual numbers here. Because, yeah, as you've implied, it's US and North America and Europe in general that make up the vast majority of subscribers. So, outside of those numbers, yeah, then we get over to Australia and New Zealand. So we're still English speaking, but we're in that sort of time zone as kind of the next two. So what's the top that actually gets up to? Here we go. So the top is actually Indonesia. We actually have more subscribers in Indonesia than anywhere else in that part of the world that is not English speaking. And then we've got the Philippines, then Singapore. Hang on, let's just keep digging through these numbers here. Malaysia is up next, then Vietnam. Then we're going all over the shop here. There's Japan, and okay, then we're into really, really tiny numbers. So, okay, China doesn't even show up. Possibly, why doesn't China even show up at all? I feel like China should show up somewhere. Possibly just because of the rule of the Great Chinese Firewall or what have you. YouTube can't detect it, but it doesn't actually seem to be showing up in these analytics at all. So I'm afraid I don't actually know how many Chinese subscribers there are. Now that Claire's got her British citizenship, is there any chance to stop Brexit? I'm sure you only made this nonsense happen to get Claire to accept British citizenship. It was all a long game by me. Who knows, basically? Who flippin' knows? I don't know. The reason is that Labour are now vaguely, just in case you're unfamiliar, Labour is one of our two major political parties in the UK. They are now making lukewarm noises towards a second referendum where people might have the chance to remain. So who knows if that'll happen, if it does happen, which way it'll go. It seems more likely they're just going to delay Brexit for a bit because no one has any idea what they're doing. And honestly, like, whether you're pro-leave or pro-remain, the government right now is staffed by utter incompetence. Like, genuinely, it's shocking how incompetently the government is handling this, whatever your take on like how good or bad Brexit actually is. Like, you know, just the other day, we had Chris Grayling, who was basically tasked with arranging some extra transport infrastructure just to help, like, you know, get food and medicine into the country. And he managed to mess up the procurement so badly that they have to pay off Eurotunnel because Eurotunnel weren't given a fair chance to actually pitch for it. And one of the people that he went for instead of Eurotunnel was a ferry company that didn't own any ferries. And then someone looked into them and discovered that the company had been set up so quickly that, in fact, the actual terms and conditions on their website had been stolen from a fast food chain. This ferry company was just talking about fast food and its terms and conditions, and then it turned out that one of the senior people in that company just happened to be the brother of a Conservative peer. So all of a sudden, then, yeah, it all looks incompetent and dodgy and all sorts of business. So massive incompetence going on right now. Who bloody knows how that's going to shake out? Any ideas for this year's M80 anniversary? I have a few. I haven't decided on one yet, so I won't go saying them yet, because otherwise you might pick a favourite and then you might be disappointed if it doesn't show up. But I've got a few, but don't know exactly what it's going to be. Has Stellaris got a bit bleeding edge? The game seems a little bit less polished than in previous series. That's certainly potentially true a little bit, because this series was started just after Stellaris went over to 2.2 and launched Megacorp, and that was a huge, huge change. Not just kind of changing the way that planets worked and populations worked and introducing trade and all sorts of other things, but it also made things a lot more complicated with the addition of alloys and crime and consumer goods, and basically the game now is more complex than it's ever been before. And I think the problem is the AI doesn't know how to deal with it particularly well. And because I started this series literally just after 2.2, I didn't know the AI was going to struggle that much ahead of time. So as a result of that, like, I didn't know that what I probably should have done is whack up the difficulty a lot. So next time you see Stellaris, whenever I do another series, like, I'll probably deliberately put the difficulty to as high as possible, which basically just means all the AI get like double everything, double minerals for every miner, double energy for every generator technician, all of that sort of thing. So yeah, that should hopefully make things a little bit more challenging. But I agree, Stellaris in its current form is a bit scruffy and it absolutely needs some work rebalancing and particularly polishing the AI. John, I like the pace and cadence you used in the Fallout 76 video. Does this mean you'll slow down your current videos a bit? You've been increasing in speed over the years. Yeah, I did notice that myself when I was doing the Fallout 76 video. Obviously, when you're working off a script, it's easier to get through it without making like little mistakes and flubs that need to be fixed in editing if you're not going quite so fast. And actually, just like, I thought, okay, hang on, that might be true in general. Like, maybe if I just ever so slightly slow down my speaking speed, I might make less mistakes and it'll be faster for me to edit and for Claire to edit. So I think I've ever so slightly slowed my speaking speed over like the past week or two since the Fallout 76 video was in production and got finished off. So we'll see. Hopefully that makes things a bit easier to work with. Is the Fallout 76 community play day dead? No, absolutely not. I'm going to wait for a good update where rather than it just being a team of 4, we can all do something together. Like, ideally, once the actual servers are rolled out so we can all be in one server together, that will absolutely happen at that point. And editing Claire, can we get you to say, I'm a British citizen in your best British accent? Take it away, Claire.
I'm a British citizen, Governor. Now you gotta tell us which is worse, British Claire or American John.
Any tips for people trying to juggle a creative outlet as more than just a hobby, as well as a full-time job, which is what I was doing before I actually quit my job to do YouTube? It's difficult. It's really, really difficult. And the reason I eventually quit my job was because I felt like I was getting close to being burnt out. Like, it was just way too many hours doing a busy full-time job, as well as trying to maintain the YouTube channel. So it is so difficult. Absolutely, that's such a tricky thing to do. Like, I think you need to be prepared to potentially make sacrifices for it if you kind of want to push the hobby really, really hard and potentially have it grow towards something big at the same time as working. Something's got to give, because you've got to give yourself some downtime and you've got to give yourself time to sleep. So that means you need to find something somewhere else. And for me, it was probably that I was a bit of a hermit at times, and that's fine, because I'm, as you might be surprised here, given I, like, you know, speak in front of technically, like, online crowds, if you will, of, like, tens of thousands of people every day, I'm somewhat introverted. I'm quite the introvert. Like, you know, I don't really go out and party and whatever. So, you know, my social life is fairly quiet anyway. So that was fine. It was fine for me to sometimes be a bit of a hermit so I could work on juggling the job and juggling the YouTube. But for some people, that's not going to be feasible, because some people, you're not going to be mentally healthy unless you set aside some time for socializing. And some people, they need to set aside a certain amount of time for exercise every day or every week or whatever. Otherwise, they're not going to feel like they're in a good place physically. So it is something that's really difficult to do, because there's certain things that you should never compromise on. Like, I don't think you should ever compromise on sleep. Like, never try and cut back your sleep to do something else, because that sleep debt will just accumulate and it will just make it worse and worse as time goes by. So I suppose the best you can do is really examine your own life very, very closely indeed, and try and figure out, is there something I'm doing that's eating time that I could cut out of my life without actually hurting me physically or mentally? And if you can find things like that, you might need to look into making cuts, because if you try and do too much, you are going to end up being burnt out, and that's not good for your job, it's not good for the creative outlet, it's not good for the people around you, it's not good for anything. So you've got to make sure you've got enough time just to chill and relax and to sleep and stuff, and that might mean something else has to give. What do you think will happen once Fallout 76 gets mod and private server support? I bet most of your proposed changes could be done in a mod. They possibly could, but it would be a huge, stupid amount of error. Like, my idea of, like, the phase system, where depending on how much nuking there is around the world, like, you know, animals die and plants die and stuff, that's like a total reskin of the entire map being done dynamically as nukes fall. Like, that's insane. That's absolutely ludicrous. So, it's probably theoretically possible, but I don't know whether anyone will be able to make it work, because it's such a stupidly large amount of work. How offended would you be if someone used your flip mug to microwave tea? Hugely and unforgivably offended. John, I've just Patreon-scribed, and one of the reasons I've decided to donate is to ask you if you're going to play RimWorld again. I can confirm, it is in the schedule, currently being marked for about 3 or so weeks from now. I have been meaning to go back to it for some time. It's been displaced by a few other things. I can confirm it should be out within the next month. Is there a game you can't go back to because you roleplayed it so completely that it would feel like cheating? For example, I can't replay Mass Effect because it would besmirch the memory of Elsa Shepherd. I feel a little bit that way about certain parts of Skyrim. Like, I can totally play Skyrim again, but I don't think I can ever travel with Benor again at this point. Benor now just belongs to the ages of the ridiculous epic of Benor and his many lives and deaths in the Skyrim series. Like, I can't travel with Benor anymore. Like, at this point, I think I need to just stay away from Morthal in general. Benor just gets left alone in his own personal little reservation where I shan't trouble him. What do you think of the upcoming Detective Pikachu movie? It looks absolutely ridiculous and slightly terrifying in places because of the design of some of the Pokemon, but I kind of admire Nintendo for just doing something so wildly out there. I might well give it a look, I don't know. Since Nintendo stuff is now more likely on the channel, any plans to play some of the games from their older systems? The GameCube and Super NES had some great games. The GameCube in particular, I love. GameCube may be one of my favourite consoles of all time, and I have a big collection of GameCube games. So absolutely, there is a plan to bring some of those to the channel at some point. Now Nintendo are playing ball. Claire and I are working on, like, you know, the technical side of how to make that work right now. Have you wanted to critique Joseph Anderson versus Fallout 76? He speaks fairly harshly about the game, but also has some constructive criticisms. I'm aware of it, I haven't actually watched it yet. it came out at a really unfortunate moment because that came out right at the beginning of February, which is just when I was starting to lock down the script for Fallout 76 and starting to move towards recording some of the initial footage and getting the script finalized, proofreading it, getting the audio recorded, starting to pass that over to Claire so she could start doing the audio cleanup on that while I could start working on the visuals and all of that business. So that video, which I'm aware of, I think I actually became aware of it like a few days after it came out. So that was, yeah, that came out like 2 weeks before mine. So it was slightly too late to be included in my consideration because I believe I've actually seen literally every video essay about Fallout 76 that existed at the point where I started actually really fleshing out the script. But that one came out just after the script was already fairly well fleshed out, so I hadn't had time to get round to that one yet. So thank you for reminding me it exists. I will very likely watch it this evening, in fact. But yeah, that one was not watched before I actually put my script together, so I'd be curious how much there's actually any crossover between the two of them. Oh, it's another shag, marry, kill. Right, so the contestants are a weeping angel, but with massive breasts, Claire with a giant fancy moustache that presumably I'm not allowed to like shave off or whatever, and Hong Kong Phooey, who is a karate dog. Okay, so obviously I'm going to marry Claire, because it's going to take more than a giant moustache to put me off Claire. I quite like Claire, so I guess I'll marry Claire. And then, okay, then we start getting into difficult territory. Because for the good of the universe, I probably ought to kill the Weeping Angel. But the Weeping Angel is also human. And I don't really want to have sex with a cartoon male dog. So, as the Weeping Angel, all I need to do is really, keep my eyes open and keep looking at it while I'm having sex with it. That is safe. So I'll go for, shag the Weeping Angel and I'll kill Hong Kong Phooey because I don't really want to have sex with a male cartoon dog. What kind of UK-inspired Pokemon would you like to see in Gen 8? Okay, I'd like to see a tiny, cute, adorable little Tesco Express that evolves into a slightly meaner, bigger Tesco Metro that finally evolves at level 36 into a giant Tesco superstore that should be like as big as Whale Lord, alright? That's how big it should be. That's what I want to see. I want to see the evolution of Tesco, damn it. And on a similar note, any thoughts about UK myths, legends, and cryptids that would make good Pokemon? Actually, that's a really good point. I really hope the Beast of Bodmin is represented. This is a giant black cat of some description that no one's entirely sure whether it really, exists or not. So, it would be kind of cool if there was some form of mysterious giant black cat Pokemon that was very hard to catch that had some sort of name based on Bodmin, because it's the Beast of Bodmin. That'd be cool. And I would say Nessie, but there kind of already is a Loch Ness Monster Pokemon, because isn't Lapras kind of based a bit on Nessie? I don't know if Lapras is based on Nessie. It feels like Lapras is based on Nessie already. So possibly we just need to put some Laprases in the various lochs in Scotland and that'll be fine. But I would love for the Beast of Bodmin to be represented. And are you going to dress up Tabby as a Pokemon for the release video? No, because Tabby doesn't enjoy that sort of thing and she's had a bad week. Stop picking on Tabby. Also, Pokemon Sword or Pokemon Shield? Honestly, I'd probably rather go for Shield, but I'll make my decision based on, unique Pokemon per each version in case I like the look of, the Pokemon in each version. In the same way, I'm not going to make a decision about my starter until I see, their rough stat distribution and what their final evolutions look like. With the exception of, it's going to take one hell of a turnaround for me to want the Grass one, because the Grass one is boring. Do you plan on going back to Total War Warhammer 2 to play campaigns or Conquest in the future? I have actually. I play a little bit of Total War Warhammer 2 on my spare time. I think it's a really good game. But the series get very, very low views, so I probably won't bother making an actual series out of it. Unless, of course, like with the Vampire Coast, there's actually, a big new update where I might make a one-off just to talk about that. John, have you ever tried the game Oxenfree? No, but I have seen other people's playthroughs of, the first opening bits of it. And I agree, it looks really, really cool and interesting. As you say, a tense, supernatural thriller thing. So you select dialogue options quickly to potentially ruin friendships and use a portable radio to open doors. It does look really cool. At some point, probably expect a one-off or a mini-series on it, though I don't have a time in mind for that sort of thing. How much do you think people in the Hitman universe know about Agent 47 and the agency in general? It is a bit weird, because, like, the whole point of things is they probably shouldn't know anything. Like, 47, the whole point of him is he's this invisible shadow, and obviously no one knows what he looks like, because otherwise everyone would know just to look for the bloody barcode on the back of his head. Because he's very, very distinctive, with the bald head and the barcode, and the fact he's very broad and very tall. Like, everyone would know what to look like, especially as he shows up dressed in the same way, with the same colour tie to every mission. So clearly it has to be kind of the point that nobody knows what he looks like, and yet, whenever we have, like, a more narrative Hitman game, everyone seems to know about the agency, everyone's heard of 47, people are requesting 47, like, by name or number, I suppose. So yeah, it is kind of a bit confusing what people know. I guess the idea is everyone knows conceptually about Agent 47. Like, they know there is a person called Agent 47 who always gets the job done perfectly. And I suppose we have to assume that canonically, Agent 47 completes every single mission in a perfect Silent Assassin fashion, which doesn't make a huge amount of sense, because back in the days of Hitman 2 Silent Assassin, that was pretty much impossible. Like, there are some missions you pretty much can't get Silent Assassin on, just because of, like, the nature of the weird bonus objectives and stuff like that, or it's basically so difficult as to be impossible. I don't know if there's any missions in, Hitman 2 where it's physically impossible to get Silent Assassin. I think it might be. I think there might actually be missions where it basically cannot be done. And then, of course, we've got Hitman Absolution, which may or may not be canon at this point. It's kind of unclear there. But yeah, Hitman Absolution, where 47 absolutely fluffs up and is on the run, is being chased down, and people are blatantly looking for him and seem to be able to recognize him on sight. So someone has a vague idea of what he looks like, because, like, if you're wandering around in, like, the station when you're on the run from the hotel after that all goes explode, then yeah, the police, if they catch sight of you, will recognize you, which means someone must have circulated a description of your appearance. So yeah, how much do they know? I don't know. It's all very unclear, because if no one knows what 47 looks like, how is it that in public spaces, guards are capable of recognizing you, and particularly police recognizing you in Absolution? Let's just pretend Absolution didn't happen, and 47's, like, perfect at everything, and it's always Silent Assassin, because that at least makes a bit more sense. John, what are the chances we'll get more series on the channel? Right now we just have Stellaris and Fallout New California. I am hoping to introduce another series into rotation. The thing is, right now we're trying to get caught up after Fallout 76 because we burnt the entire video backlog. We've got, like, nothing in reserve at the minute. So until we're back to being stabilized, I cannot introduce another series. But I would like to do so. I do have one in mind, because, yeah, I was thinking of maybe, like, Monday and Friday, because then it's basically just one extra video a week, because the thing there would be, on Monday, the part of the series would actually share its spot with the live stream upload from the weekend. So as a result of that, there'd be 2 videos out that day, the series part and the live stream. So there wouldn't actually be, like, a brand new thing you've not seen before. It would be more like how Thursday sometimes is. Like, right now we had, like, Stellaris and Smash Brothers potentially pairing up. Though actually, I'm not sure they ever will pair up, because we don't have part 3 recorded yet, so I'm not sure when that's actually going to happen. And Stellaris, meanwhile, is coming to an end soon, so maybe that'll actually never happen. But that was supposed to be the plan. This last Thursday was supposed to be Stellaris and Smash Brothers, but that didn't actually happen. So that might be how it works, but that would be an extra video a week, which is more work, and right now we're pretty much at capacity. So hopefully soonish, not quite yet. John, here's a tongue twister, because clearly you just hate me. Right. Snipper clips, nipple slips, snipper clips, nipple slips, snipper clips, nipple slips, snipper clips, nipple slips. I don't know why I decided to say this. I think I just about pulled that off there. John, if you could choose one board game to make into a video game, which one would you choose and why? Archipelago, which is a big, beautiful game where you lay down hexes and build these beautiful kind of Caribbean islands and a Caribbean archipelago, obviously, and you build towns, and you kind of, you expand the control of your territory, stuff like that. It would be very, very fun indeed, because, yeah, with proper 3D graphics in a video game, I think it could be a really beautiful town builder. So, yeah, that'd just be really, really lovely. Please bring back Why Not Wednesday. Okay. I've discussed this before. Why not Wednesday 1? Alright, everything is Why Not Wednesday. There are indeed many games from previous generations that I've missed. but they get covered all the time. Like just the other day, we covered Star Wars The Force Unleashed, which is a decade old. I never played it at the time, we've covered it now. That could have been released on Wednesday and called Why Not Wednesday, but I just released it on Saturday because, you know, that's the bigger day. So like if there's a video I'm particularly proud of, I tend to release it there. Recently we covered Mercenaries 2, World in Flames, old 360 game. That could have been a Why Not Wednesday, but I just didn't call it Why Not Wednesday. There are Why Not Wednesdays all over the place. They're just not called Why Not Wednesday anymore. I promise, I'm not like not covering older games. I'm covering older games actually all the time, I think, next to many channels. It's just they're not actually in a series called Why Not Wednesday anymore. Because Why Not Wednesday won. It won the war. Every day is Why Not Wednesday now. Also, why didn't you include Fallout Brotherhood of Steel or Fallout Tactics in either of your Mega Fallout videos? That's mainly because Brotherhood of Steel, most people just pretend doesn't exist. I'm not sure it's really got much to say or add about Fallout, to be honest, aside from an example of what not to do for the most part. And Tactics is fine, it's just I don't know much about it, and most people don't know a huge amount about it. The thing is, when you're making comparative points between 76, you need to use frames of reference that people are familiar with. Like, there's not much point me comparing Fallout 76 to a little-known game on the N64 that nobody knows about, because the point is pointless, because no one understands why I'm making the comparison. So I felt like I wanted to keep the comparisons to the better-known Fallout games. Fallout 1, Fallout 2, Fallout 3, and Fallout New Vegas. So that's kind of why I did it that way. John, could you perhaps give us old fogies who've never picked up a Pokemon game before a brief introduction to how it all works, like why they're two games and what's the difference? Okay, basically it's just a turn-based RPG where you can have a party of up to 6 creatures with you. And as for why there's 2 of them, this is mainly just because they were originally launched on the Game Boy, and the Game Boy had a link cable, so people could like fight each other or trade, but no one ever really used it for anything in terms of game development. So up to that point, Game Boys were pretty much very solitary, you just played it by yourself. Pokemon was the first real game to actually introduce multiplayer as an idea to the Game Boy overall, not just to Pokemon, but to the Game Boy overall, where trading was a thing to give it a social element. So typically, all you'll find is one version will have certain Pokemon you can't get in the other, and then the other version will have its own bunch of unique Pokemon, where if you want to get them all, you need to trade between the different versions, which used to be more complicated because you used to have to trade directly by getting like 2 Game Boys together and linking them with a cable. These days, where it's all done online, it feels like it's a bit more of an unnecessary faff, to be honest. It feels like it's a bit of a vestigial relic, to be honest, but pretty much it's just a turn-based party RPG. Generally very good. Start with the 4th generation if you've got a DS. Diamond and Pearl are pretty solid. John, you mentioned at the beginning of your Crusader Kings 2 video series that some of your favourite series you've produced contain stories that you were able to tell as you went along. Looking back on them, which stories have you been most proud of creating? I'm probably going to have to say Fallout 3 Kill Everything, which I think was very, very interesting indeed. Crusader Kings 2 itself, Rome Total War, of course, and naturally Skyrim. Those 4 are probably my favourites. John, I'm a projectionist at a cinema. I have to be in the building overnight while the carpets are getting deep cleaned soon. Luckily, it's easy to entertain yourself with a cinema at your disposal. Which of your videos do you think will look best on the big screen? Probably none of them, because the thing about YouTube is it compresses videos to hell. So if you put any video on YouTube on the biggest screen you can imagine, you're just going to notice all the, like, you know, horrible little giblets from the compression, more obviously. But if I had to pick out the 2 prettiest videos I've done recently, I'd probably have to say Eastshade and Far Cry New Dawn. Those are both very, very pretty games. Can a Jaffa cake with lime filling still be called a Jaffa cake? No, there's actually a technical definition for a Jaffa cake with lime filling. They're actually called abominations that should be burnt. From when you first put up the submission post, how long do you usually wait between posting it and recording the podcast? As long as I can, for the most part. So this went up last Sunday. I'm actually recording this on Saturday, so Claire's going to edit this together on Sunday morning, this last morning for you, and then it'll go up that same evening. So I try and leave it up for, like, you know, the vast majority of a full week, just to make sure everyone's got a chance to actually see it and get their question in if that's what they want to do. John, I know you're the exact opposite of a car guy, but by any chance would you play Forza Horizon 4? It's a racing game that has a mix of realism and arcade racing, and it's an open world. Honestly, the thing is, I just don't quite get racing games sometimes. It's not just that I'm not a car guy, I don't fully understand the appeal of hyper-realistic racing games. Like, bring it on with Destructo stuff and whatever. Like, Wreckfest, great fun. Give me a car, smash the hell out of it, physics, smashy, crashy, great. Love all of that stuff. Mario Kart, love me some Mario Kart. Loved Diddy Kong Racing back in the day. Give me some nice arcadey, cartoony, power-uppy stuff. Absolutely. I don't quite get the appeal of realistic racers. But if you say that one's a really solid one, then sure, that could be a good one for me to maybe try and give it a go. So if I ever see it floating around, get review code, see it on sale, might well give it a look-see. So I'm curious if the way I watch your content affects the numbers negatively. Due to time, I tend to watch the first 10 to 20 minutes of a video in the morning, then won't catch the rest of the video until the evening or the weekend. For example, the Fallout 76 video I'm halfway through after 3 sessions. Now that's interesting. That's very, very interesting indeed, because we're getting into algorithms that are closely guarded secrets at Google here. So there's ways in which that's probably good and ways in which that might be bad, but we don't really know. For example, if you are actually going back and finishing the video, then the overall watch minutes you're contributing to the video is quite high, which is good. But if you're splitting it up over several views, then that means that the average watch time per view is being reduced, which is probably bad, but we don't know how much Google weights total view time versus average view time versus each other when trying to calculate whether a video is good or not. But on the other hand, multiple views means multiple ads might be showing up, though if you're on Patreon, always use ad blocker with my blessing. Absolutely block all of those ads. But if you're not, then that means multiple ads are showing up, so that's a tiny bit more ad revenue right there. But on the other, how many others are we up to? I can't remember how many others we're up to. But yeah, on whatever hand I'm onto at this exact moment in time, more views over time is probably good. Because if Google detects that a video has hit its long tail and is no longer getting as many views whatsoever, then that probably means it needs to be demoted off wherever it's ranking or whatever. Whereas if Google detects someone's going back and watching a video multiple times or picking up where they left off, that's probably a good sign. The video is compelling, in fact. So yeah, the problem is I can't really answer this because this is complicated algorithmic stuff Google sent. I can put some estimates in, but probably on balance, any good you're doing and any bad you're doing are kind of countering each other, so I wouldn't worry about it. Enjoy the video however you want. Was it difficult playing Smash Brothers with Dan while Dan sounded like he was dying? No, it made it much easier because he was being distracted by how he was dying, so it made it much easier to kick his ass. No, that's not the actual answer. The thing is, when you're recording something and you're actually kind of doing a collab with somebody, naturally, there's like bits you do for comic effect. So, absolutely, I knew that Dan had been ill recently, so I knew he was a little bit under the weather. But when he was commenting on how he just sprayed blood all over the keyboard and the screen or whatever, I don't know how much I should be concerned about that because I don't know whether he's exaggerating for comic effect, whether he's doing a bit and he's going to play up his illness because he's kind of working towards a bit later in the video, or if he's actually having a medical emergency and he's too polite to say. So, I don't know these things, unfortunately. So, as a general rule, we don't have, safe words or anything when we're doing collabs, but, if someone has an actual emergency, they will say, hey, can we just stop for a second? And he didn't say that at any point. He was kind of coughing and pointing this out, but he didn't at any point ask to stop. So I assumed he was either not that bad or he was doing a bit and leading into a bit, but I don't know. I don't know. It sounds like he's having a bad time of it with his health right now. So hopefully he didn't need to go to hospital after that. Hopefully he just needed to chill out for a bit. I don't know when part 3 of Smash is going to be. We haven't recorded it yet, so hopefully that'll be next weekend if we can actually get some time in the calendar to get that sorted out. I am not sure right this second. And finally, John, your Crusader Kings 2 series really got me into the game. I'm finding it so hard to learn all the mechanics as the game isn't great for a tutorial. It really isn't. Its inbuilt tutorial is really flimsy. So honestly, like I was saying earlier, I'd just say make mistakes. Make mistakes and accept you're going to make mistakes for quite some flipping time. Have you ever considered making your own how to play video for grand strategy games? I wouldn't flipping dare, you know. Because if I sat down and said, here's some things you need to know about Crusader Kings 2, I know for a fact I'd get half of them wrong. Or almost right but wrong a little bit. Or wrong but in the right way or right but in the wrong way. And people would be like, no, this is all misinformation. This is all wrong. I wouldn't flipping dare. Like, a game like Crusader Kings 2, I wouldn't actually, like, dare, because there are people who are way better qualified than me to do that, who have very likely already done it. And if there aren't any, like, really short, simple videos about Crusader Kings 2, it's probably because it's impossible to do, because there's so much complexity there that any attempt to simplify it down would just lead to oversimplifications, and everything would just go wrong, and in general, it's a bad idea. So yeah, maybe like for Fallout or something. I mean, I have done some, like, you know, character build guides and beginner's guides for survival mode and stuff for Fallout 4 in the past. So who knows, maybe for the right game I could do that sort of thing. I don't know. But not for Crusader Kings 2. I wouldn't flipping dare. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of the questions, and thus the end of the Patroncast for this month. Thank you very, very much for sticking around. As I've said before, the first few months of the year are slow months for YouTube channels. Like, you know, views are low and subscribers are low and ad revenue goes way, way down. So Patreon is keeping us safe, keeping us secure. You guys are awesome, and you guys are the reason that we can just kind of crack on and focus on making great videos, making good stuff, and not have to worry about whether the channel is actually safe or not. So thank you all so very, very much for hanging around. Hopefully I will see you next month for the Patroncast 2, and hopefully me and Claire have had a chance to rest up a little bit, get the backlog constructed, and hopefully poor little Tabby is feeling a bit less under the weather as well. Hopefully we'll all be in better shape by then. But in the meantime, I've been John. This has been many a true nut. This has been the February sort of 2019 Patroncast. Thank you very much, and goodbye.